Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 164. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, where you can see us on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. on ABC TV and 8 p.m. on Fridays on ABC, at least for 1 week before we take our holiday, 4th of July holiday. Yeah, we're going to have sunglasses. It's going to be awesome. Anytime you can see us, anytime you like, on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC News In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook as well, where you will also find timestamps and show notes in the blurb. And if you leave a little comment under those videos, we're likely to see it. You can also tweet us at PEPCHASDRDAVE at PepChaz Dr. Dave. If you want to contact me privately, ask me on Twitter, and I'll allow you a direct message or email me, and I'll respond sometime in the next 6 months. But for now, let's reacquaint ourselves with the man who I've never seen in my life raising the stakes on inconsequential views. I don't think he's even capable of it.
No.
I'm talking, of course, about Dr. Pepper himself, Dr. David Smith.
Okay, today I'm going to do my disclaimer in a triple M way.
Really?
Yes.
You going to sharpen rock?
Not all doctors are the same. Some shame, some maim, and some disclaim. Here's my disclaimer. I may work for the US Study Centre at the University of Sydney, but I don't speak for them. I don't speak for anyone. Most days, I don't speak at all. I just shut up and rock. So if you want to know what they think, visit their website. But if all you want to do is rock harder, keep listening to PEP.
That's brilliant. Oh, that's awesome.
Now for another 9 hours of the Foo Fighters.
Wow. Dave, I don't think we can follow up that, but let's just take this down several notches and ask you what you're grateful for today.
I'm very grateful for a story that you sent me earlier in the week, which I otherwise wouldn't have seen until today when it finally made it to the Washington Post. This story is about Jim Carroll, not the late punk poet who was played by Leonardo DiCaprio in the Basketball Diaries, but the state legislator from Bennington, Vermont, who has a drink driving problem. So poor old Jim Carroll started to notice that the tote bag that he would hang outside his committee room in the Vermont state legislature kept getting wet, apparently, off its own accord. So he started to notice this in January when it was happening, as he said, a couple of times a week. Then after his drink driving charge, it started happening all the time, like multiple times a day. Yeah. So naturally, he wondered what was going on with this, and he decided to go full Tommy Wiseau and set up a spy camera, which he bought for $23. Do you think it's illegal? Do you think it's legal for someone to just set up a spy camera in a legislature? I mean, it's in the corridors outside the chamber.
I can't think what the law would be they'd be breaking. Like, it's not recording sound.
True. So, it wasn't recording sound.
Yeah.
But anyway, what he found was a fellow legislator called Mary Morrissey, who is also from Bennington, but not from his party. She's a Republican. She was going up to his bag, kind of looking around to see if anyone was there, and then pouring full glasses of water into the bag and then quickly scurrying off.
And for those who are listening to this podcast, those who are watching are currently seeing overlay of some of that video.
Yeah. Now, the best video was when Jim Carroll himself actually went up to his bag and sort of felt around in it to see if it was wet. A few seconds after he disappears, Mary Morrissey appears, looks around like a meerkat, dumps a glass of water into the bag. Yeah. Now, this is obviously pretty poor behaviour.
Yes.
Pretty scandalous behaviour. I've actually got a good name for this scandal.
What's that?
Watergate.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The real Watergate.
Yeah, that's right. The real Watergate. Yes. And, but what I like about this is this is how elderly alcoholics behave. You might not have a lot of experience with this, but remember, I do because of my brush with the madness.
Ah, of course.
20 years ago. This is exactly the sort of shit that like Ken and his equally horrible girlfriend would do to each other. Or it's like something from Roald Dahl's The Twits, the things that Mr. and Mrs. Twit do to each other.
We should just clarify for those who have started tuning in the last 6 months. We're talking about Dave's ex-flatmate.
Not
Housemate,
flatmate.
housemate.
Person who lived in the same building.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, sure.
yeah, I do not want to suggest that Ken was my flatmate or housemate.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so it just, like, this is the behaviour, not of people who get drunk and misbehave, but of people who are hardly ever sober and have just lost touch with, you know, what normal behaviour even looks like. And it actually reminds me also of, are you aware of the underground recording Shut Up Little Man?
No, I'm not.
Shut Up Little Man was tape recordings that these guys made in 1987 in their apartment in San Francisco, living next to this very thin-walled apartment where these two permanently drunk World War II veterans lived and constantly argued with each other. Worth checking out. Anyway, so in the end, obviously the video evidence was overwhelming. Like, he kept this camera going for months after it was very clear who was doing this. And he's finally confronted Mary Morrissey with the evidence, and she actually finally apologised yesterday. Okay, we've got video of that apology.
It was conduct most unbecoming of my position as a representative and as a human being, and is not reflective of my 28 years of service and civility.
It was torment. There's no doubt about it, with me anyway. There's going to be some work to be done between the two of us.
Now, I'm not suggesting that both of them had been drinking since 7 a.m, but they both sounded like they'd been drinking since 7 a.m.
Can I just say how disappointed I am that this is not representative of her 28 years of service? Because I'd like to imagine it was. She spent 28 years just pouring water in people's bags.
I wonder how many other people in the chamber is like, oh, so that's why my bag's been so wet. Oh, to think I blamed the dog.
I thought Vermont was a rainforest. So now I handed this off to you like 3 days ago. I haven't been following it since. Have we worked out why she was doing it?
No, as I said, this is even trying to come up with a logic behind it. Like, maybe one day she saw him drinking water and she's like, oh, so Mr. Carroll likes water, does he? Well, let's see how he likes this. Maybe that's how it happened?
Maybe.
I don't know, but I think I've already imaginatively embellished this story enough. So,
well, I don't think you've embellished it too much because, I mean, you said it started in January.
I did.
It's currently June.
Yes.
That's a lot of water.
That is.
That's 6 months. How long did you have to stake her out before he was going to confront her?
I don't know.
Seems extraordinary. I thought one video would probably do the trick.
Excellent question.
Yeah, it's there's a lot. I've got a lot of questions, and none of them have been answered about this.
Yeah. There are definitely more questions than answers. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that is a good story. I'm grateful for it as well. In fact,
thank you for passing it on to me.
No problems. This is actually one of those ones, one of those days where both of us are grateful for each other's gratitude. Like, in that both of us know each other's grateful and we both love it. In fact, I think probably if I hadn't gone for my one, you would have gone for my one had you known about it.
Totally.
Because I think secretly Dave is much more grateful for my grateful than for his.
I am. There's no secret.
Okay. AI might be coming for us. Maybe the machines are going to destroy us all in the next few decades. We can't know.
No.
But if they do, it will all be worth it because of this story alone. Anthony Hudson is a Republican running in the primary for Michigan's 8th district. He's not doing too well.
No.
When I say he's not doing too well, let me put a number on how not well he's doing. During the 3rd, there was an Up One Insights poll. Up One? Insights poll of the district, of the 8th district in Michigan. And it has...
It's the area around Saginaw, for those of you who are fans of the Mitten.
Thank you very much. And that poll has Hudson coming 3rd in the primary on 1%. So he needed to get people's attention.
He did.
And he found a way to get their attention with this ad on TikTok.
Another dream. Yes, it is me, Martin Luther King. I came back from the dead to say something. As I was saying, I have another dream. That Anthony Hudson will be Michigan's 8th district's next congressman. Yes, I have a dream again. Okay, now I am going back to where I came from. Goodbye.
My name is Anthony Hudson, and I approve this message.
I think we all know what the highlight of this is. Okay, now I'm going back to where I came from. Goodbye. I like closure in my political ads. That's what I like about this one. It's so polite as well, Martin Luther King. I suppose this is Martin Luther King. Now, you might think that was a bit tacky, but just hear me out. Because Anthony has an explanation.
Oh, yes.
Is a quote from Anthony. A volunteer gave my social media credentials to one of his friends who then posted an AI video without my knowledge. It appears they not only used AI for Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice, but also with my voice to make it appear more authentic.
Victim of AI.
The volunteer has been released and all my social media credentials have been updated. I would have never approved such a stupid and disrespectful video. I sincerely apologize that all of you have seen this, and I'm extremely furious about this situation. This could happen to any of us, so please be cautious and aware of who has your personal information. This could happen to any of us, Dave.
Could happen to any of us.
Any of us. You're just going along in a primary, minding your own business, then someone makes an AI of Martin Luther King Jr. and an AI of you as well, and then releases them in an ad on your channel without telling you. It could happen to anyone.
Anyone.
People are always just volunteering to spend hours working on ads for me without my knowledge. Happens all the time. So have some sympathy. And look, there's more to this. There's more to this as well. Because you might go, okay, steady on. Don't back over this guy. Like he would never approve such a stupid and disrespectful video. No. He would never approve of that.
Stupid
and he has released the volunteer. Mm-hmm. And all his social media credentials have been updated, okay?
Yeah.
So back off. He's released the volunteer. A few hours later, there was a late breaking update to the story.
Don't think I know this.
Just after it went viral.
Yes.
This is about 4 or 5 hours later.
Okay.
I'll read from HuffPost.
Okay.
Just a few hours later, Hudson performed a stunning 180 and claimed he'd now decided, quote, not only to keep my campaign staffer, but also give him a raise, as I believe MLK would be disgusted at the complete suffering of Flint, Michigan residents under the current administration's watch.
God.
He added, if MLK were alive today, I do believe he would endorse me and my vision for a better Michigan. That was quite a ride, wasn't it?
That is quite amazing.
Pretty generous, I thought, for him to give his volunteer staffer a raise. He could pay him, 1 cent an hour?
So he's gone from I've released that volunteer to, I've released the volunteer.
That's right. That's,
Jesus. I mean, okay, misuse of Martin Luther King Jr., unfortunately, is a very big category of art and commercial endeavor. Unfortunately, it's huge. This is the Willie's chocolate experience of the misuse of Martin Luther King Jr.
Great reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Michigan as well, I think they particularly appreciate this.
No, it's... Yeah, like not that he had any chance of, not that
1%.
any Republican has any chance of winning that district, but
especially him.
Yes, but he certainly made his mark.
The thing I love how he went from I would never do something so stupid to I will give it like 4 hours later I will give him a raise. This is exactly what Martin Luther King would do. I think my takeaway on this is I love how I don't know how this has happened, but under Trump, these shameless MAGA types have somehow lost any ability to lie in a credible fashion.
Yeah.
Like my daughter was lying credibly when she was 3 years old. And these adults can't do it. Like, how they lost? I mean, if you got them 5 years ago, I think they would have been able to lie.
Yeah.
How have they lost the ability to lie?
Oh, they've lost all kinds of things.
I don't understand.
Look, because I feel extremely dirty after even listening to that, I'm actually going to give a positive recommendation of something.
Oh, yeah?
There are a lot of books about Martin Luther King, like new ones are being produced all the time. Massive new ones, high-profile ones are being produced all the time. I want to give a shout-out to one that's been a little bit overlooked, which is by Maurice Wallace, and it's called King's Vibrato. Now, this is an analysis of Martin Luther King through sound history. So it's all about the way that the unique sounds associated with Martin Luther King, everything from his voice to specific recordings of him to specific music that would accompany him. It's all about the cultural history of how that was made. It's not the easiest read, but it's an incredibly rewarding read. It was put out by Duke University Press, I think in 2022. I actually I reviewed it for the Journal of Religious History last year. Really, really highly recommend this book if you want to somehow cleanse yourself after listening to that video.
That's going to the book list?
That is going to the book list.
Which
yes.
you can see on the blurb. If you click on the blurb, you can see the full book list. That's on Facebook and YouTube. And look, and apparently Martin Luther King has also endorsed this. Let's just play it now. No. Okay, I'm going back to where I came from. Goodbye. Look, if you're worried about Anthony Hudson, just take comfort in the fact that it's not just instant karma. This is anticipatory karma.
Yes.
He's at 1%.
1%.
So if Anthony Hudson wants to have another message from the dead, he should talk to his campaign. I'm grateful for you, Anthony. I'm grateful. Even if Dr. Dave isn't, I'm very grateful. Let's go through some correspondences, hey? Okay. I'm gonna whiz through a couple here. We've got a few quickies, and then there's a few for you that are a little bit longer. Community service correspondence. As you all know, I've been fantasizing about Trump being censored community service, which I think would be the best of all worlds. Yeah. Well, David, not you, David, a different David is spoiling our fun.
Oh.
If Trump received community service, not sure it'd be practical. I've been in the city when the president comes to town, and the amount of street closures and thousands of additional police put on duty is amazing. He would not be picking up trash in public, as the streets for blocks around would be closed. Not sure people will be happy with them shutting down the LIE or Van Wyck expressways for his community service.
That is a very good point.
Damn it. He's right.
Damn you and your complete accuracy.
You suck with your logical outlook, David. You suck. But he's right. Gooner correspondence. I called Judge Matt Kaczmarek a Gooner last week. Do you know what that means?
Arsenal fan.
It means other things as well. The Drunk Monk writes, Chaz, please don't ever call someone a Gooner ever again. Sicknay writes, you and I clearly have different understandings as to what a Gooner is. Maybe don't Google that with safe search off.
Okay.
Sean writes, Chaz, love referring to Judge Kaczmarek as a Gooner, but I'd encourage you to Google that word because it's taken on a particular fun meaning lately.
Oh.
Honestly, I actually meant to call him a goober. Which, as you know, Dave, is one of my favourite insults.
Yes,
I call everyone goobers, but I had a slip of the tongue and it still sounded appropriately contemptuous to me.
Yes.
So I just stuck with it. It turns out I shouldn't have stuck with it.
Okay.
A gooner is an individual who practices a form of masturbation that involves edging for a long period of time, causing a hypnotic trance-like state.
Okay.
Now, I have no idea how Judge Kaczmarek chooses to masturbate. I did not mean it that way. But thank you, Internet, for providing me with an image that I did not need nor want. I'm going to need cleansing. You need cleansing after MLK. I need cleansing after imagining Kaczmarek.
Well, I don't have any book recommendations to cleanse that one. Sorry.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Lankford correspondence for you all. While we're covering my stuff-ups, apparently they were quite plentiful.
Oh, like the fact that you kept using the wrong first name to refer to Lankford?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, why don't you tell me?
You were using it so convincingly. Yeah. I thought I must just have I misremembered his name as James.
Yeah. Well, Wagtag's on your side. Okay. The side of correctness.
Okay.
Wagtag did point out that, yes, that he's James Lankford. According to Google, says Wagtag, Adam Lankford is a criminal justice professor whose research, perhaps helpfully for Republican Congress members, runs the gamut from suicide terrorism to sexual frustration theory. The thing is, Adam Lankford, that guy, it's not just a different guy with the same name. That guy is one of America's top experts on mass shootings. We've interviewed him many times on Planet America.
Right, okay.
That's why he was in my head.
Okay, that's why you were more than justifiably sympathetic to him.
Well, I wasn't thinking of the person we interviewed, but that's why he was in the brain. He's also, by the way, in case you're curious about Adam Lankford, he's the person who invented the idea of not naming mass murders to stop the copycat effect. He's actually a big shot in that world.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had a touch of the Bidens. I got their names confused. So I wish you'd told me. But anyway, so there's that. Economic correspondence from Kelly. I wonder if people's poor perception of the economy has anything to do with the cooled labour market. I was thinking about my own situation this morning and how any way you look at it, I'm doing the best I've ever done, but I'm still not where I'd like to be. I wondered if I should try to get a better job, and that's when it hit me. I probably couldn't get a better job right now, even if I tried, because low unemployment looks good on paper, but it means that companies aren't in any kind of hurry to hire for open positions. The result is a feeling of stagnation that not only is my wage too low and my cost too high, but I can't do anything about it. Do you think that has any influence on people's perception, or are these thoughts generally far less prominent than the basic facts of income and costs, Dave?
No idea.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting idea. I mean, I think in general, people's lived experience is just not matching up to the way that the numbers are going. There was some research I read somewhere this week saying that until COVID-19, when you looked at consumer sentiment and when you regressed the various variables that could go into it, inflation rarely played much of a role. Sometimes a little bit, but usually it wasn't significant. Now inflation plays a huge role in consumer sentiment. One of the reasons for that is that it's just been such a long time since we've seen inflation like this. So, in many ways, I think the way that people are actually experiencing the economy just doesn't line up with how it looks on paper.
What I'd add, Kelly, is honestly the standard analysis of unemployment, doesn't mean it's true, but the standard analysis of unemployment rates is exactly the opposite of what you just said. The usual logic is when unemployment rates are low, then it's harder for firms to find workers because most of them aren't looking for a job. And so they have to work harder. The employers have to work harder to hire people, so they offer higher wages to entice you. So actually, you'd probably be more likely to be able to get a better job now when unemployment levels are low than when they're high and you have lots of competition. That's the standard analysis of unemployment rates. That doesn't mean people actually feel that way because people are not economic robots.
No.
That's all just theory, and maybe heaps of people are thinking just like you are. I don't know. It's a good question, though. Caitlin Clark correspondence from a person who didn't have a name. The person without a name. Yeah. Very impressed with how Dave answered this entire situation. There you go.
Thank you.
One final thing to note, though, is that the women's national team have held 3 camps to finalise their roster for Paris, and Caitlin was unable to attend any of them due to her collegiate duties and her tournament run. The women's team value consistency in their roster and don't often replace many players between runs like the men's team are doing with parachuting LeBron, Steph and KD following their poor performance of the team last year at the FIBA World Cup. Yes. I think that's a really good point.
It is a great point. Yeah. I think they came 4th at the FIBA World Cup. I mean, the FIBA World Cup is often an embarrassment for the United States, but like 4th is particularly embarrassing.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yes, yeah.
No. But anyway, I think that's a good thought.
Very good thought.
Clark.
Yeah.
Election correspondence from Zax. I wonder how much of a factor weather will be in this election, considering higher mail-in, the higher mail-in from Democrats, plus a higher proportion of fair weather voters for Trump. I think that's a good thought. What do you think?
That is a good thought. This is a time when the metaphorical term fair weather voting actually potentially becomes a literal term. Yeah. This is why it is stupidly counterproductive for Republicans to complain about mail-in voting. I mean, there have actually been, I think, quiet efforts being made by Republicans who are serious about winning the election to expand their mail-in voting base, but Donald Trump's still saying, it should only be same-day voting. Like, the more that you denigrate mail voting, the more you are just shooting yourself in the ass. Because that's a serious concern. November, obviously, like it's an unpleasant time. It's not the worst time of the year, but I remember in Michigan, generally the first snow would fall at the beginning of November. The real snow would start to fall around Thanksgiving, but the first snow would fall at the beginning of November. And there's nothing more demoralizing than looking out the window and seeing the first snow. Because then you know, there's another like 6 or 7 months of this coming. So, good point.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And in fact, I'd go even further and I'd say, even though I think your actual point's great, Zax, I'd go even further and I'd say, if the Republicans are smart, what they should do now is they should now just go back on everything that they've been saying for the last few years, and they should embrace all the tactics that Democrats have been pushing to try and open up the vote as much as they possibly can. It's going to help them.
I don't see why they can't do that. They're not the US women's national basketball team. They're not. I mean, they're a lot more like the men's national basketball team. They're not that either. But in terms of their complete devaluing of consistency, that's what they're more like.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now we got, I said, we'll zip through them fast. Now we got a couple of questions for you in particular, Dave.
All right, yes, yeah.
Owen asks, I've been seeing the use of Islamofascism being thrown around lately.
Yep.
This has been in the context of labelling pro-Palestinian protesters as such. I have tried reading about the meaning of it, but I have struggled to find anything useful / trustworthy. Are you able to provide some insight about this term and where it comes from?
Yes, I am. So the term Islamic fascism was used for years, usually in the Muslim world by opponents of regimes who were accusing regimes of using Islam to prop up what were just bog standard authoritarian regimes. But the term really came to prominence in the West after 9/11, and probably the person who was most responsible for it was Christopher Hitchens. Now, Christopher Hitchens, whatever problems you have with his thought, he was a very, very good user of language, and he would never have used a term as ugly as Islamofascism. He called it fascism with an Islamic face, was the term that he used. Now, when you look at terms, you've always got to look at what's their analytical use and what's their political use. I'll come to the analytical use or lack thereof of Islamofascism in a second, but the political use of Islamofascism or fascism with an Islamic face, this was used by people like Hitchens to try to get liberals and the left on board with the war on terror, to say you should be in favour of this because we're fighting a form of fascism, but also as a way of trying to berate the left and liberals for not getting on board with the war on terror or with the Iraq war. Now, admittedly, a lot of liberals got on board with the war on terror and the Iraq war, not so many from the left, but that's what the political use of it was, to say if you're not going along with us here, you're in favour of fascism. So George W. Bush himself actually used it in 2005, said, there are many terms that people have used for this. Some call it militant jihadism, some call it Islamofascism, blah, blah, blah. So, once the president says it, that adds a new layer of circulation to it. Okay, so fast forward to today, where it's being used probably by the same people who were using it against anti-war protesters in 2003, using it against pro-Palestine protesters now. And its use is just as lazy and stupid now as it was then. Islamofascism is not a useful analytical category. There are certainly many forms of Islamic-inflected authoritarianism around the world, but if somebody is serious about a program that involves the establishment of Islamic law, then you are not a fascist, because fascism is something that is completely, it's not about the will of God, right? It's the core of fascism is always some idea of the national people and the national state. Islamic law is about centering the will of God. So if you're serious about that, then you're not a fascist. You might be, you might act like a fascist in terms of your authoritarianism, but you're not a fascist. When Oriana Fallaci asked Ayatollah Khamenei, I don't know whether she directly asked him, are you a fascist? But she asked him what he thought of fascism. And he's like, fascism is terrible. Fascism is completely incompatible with Islam. He probably didn't say it in that voice, but,
It's a great new character, Dave.
Yeah. If you have a look at the Muslim Brotherhood, they said much the same thing. In fact, the Egyptian regime they opposed looked a lot more fascist than they did. If you were going to talk about fascism with an Islamic face, I think the closest you would come to it would be Islamic State, just because of the degree of this ideology of total warfare and destroying everything, completely apocalyptic, kind of basically it's us or it's the rest of the world. There's something pretty fascistic about that. But once again, if you're serious about the establishment of Islamic law, then you're not a fascist. And even though these people can behave like fascists, in the same way that I've resisted the application of the label fascist to Donald Trump, I don't think that we should just be calling everything bad or everything authoritarian fascist when they represent very different political programs. And when you look at the political uses of calling Trump a fascist, one of the things that I've complained about there is that people, liberals especially, use it as a way of essentially distancing Trump from the United States and its own authoritarian traditions, which actually Trump is very deeply, I would say, embedded in. On the sort of flip side of that, when you use the term Islamic fascism or IslamoFascism, you're essentially imposing a European template on forms of authoritarianism that are actually quite different.
That's a good answer. And while you're running hot, I got a request from Tobin.
Yep.
I wonder if there might be the opportunity for a brief mention of Noam Chomsky in one of the upcoming PEPs. As a classic libertarian, I would imagine Chomsky's writings and debates over the decades may have been appreciated by Chaz. Sadly, at least, according to a post on the r/Chomsky forum, it looks like correspondence from his family and spokesperson to the community has revealed the 95-year-old isn't likely to be around much longer, following a medical emergency about a year ago. As a clear-thinking political analyst of US domestic and foreign policy over the previous 6 decades, unafraid of speaking out against Democratic and Republican administrations, I felt a retrospective look at his greatest achievements to critical analysis of US power, hegemony, and actions across the world from Europe to Southeast Asia, South America, and within the US would be fascinating to hear.
We don't have time to really do this justice.
No.
By the way, 95 years old. I mean, to me, he'll always be 82. I was shocked to find out he's 95. So I'm just going to say a couple of things. One is, as impressive as he is as a political commentator, he's even more impressive as a scientist. His linguistic science, some of which was famously funded by the US military back in the 1950s, really changed the intellectual world completely. His political commentary, very prolific, very impressive. There were a lot of people doing similar things, though, whereas his linguistic work was pretty revolutionary. In terms of his political work, if you want to look it up, the one that I would recommend the most is Manufacturing Consent, which he wrote with Edward Herman in, I think it was 1984. Interesting little side note on that. It's dedicated to Alex Carey. Alex Carey was an Australian psychologist who sadly died by his own hand in 1988. And Alex Carey didn't leave a big body of published work behind. So his essays were posthumously published as Taking the Risk Out of Democracy. But he was actually very influential on Chomsky's thought about how consent was manufactured in democracies. And so his daughter, Gabrielle Carey, her book, In My Father's House, is a very good account of Alex Carey. But getting back to Chomsky, one of the things that I can add to what is undoubtedly going to be a torrent of obituaries about Chomsky that will come when he dies is about his personal kindness. And I say this because around 10 years ago, I actually had 2 different honours students who interviewed Chomsky separately. And he talked to them for ages. One of them actually went to see him in person in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Another one interviewed him online. And the fact that he was willing to make himself available to students like that, and apparently he was basically prepared to make himself available to anyone who was prepared to talk to him, given how famous he was, given his just incredible scholarly and popular output, that kind of generosity with his time, I think is something that just can't be forgotten, because that is as much a part of him as his scientific analysis or his political analysis. This is his genuine commitment to community on a global scale.
Are we going to put manufacturing consent in the for
Yeah, put manufacturing consent in there.
All right, we will. Thanks for that, Dave. We may have the opportunity for a part 2 somewhere down the road if after he dies, depending on when it falls with the holidays. We've got a little bit of a break coming up. But thank you very much for that. All right, very quickly. Stats Nugget! Stats Nugget! Woo! This is the short Stats Nugget. I just really like this stat.
Okay.
It's just a stat.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Just a stat.
Ozempic you guys are probably aware of, the weight loss drug. America is basically just monopolizing the world's Ozempic, right? But it's actually a Danish drug. It's a company called Novo Nordisk that makes it from Denmark. But you wouldn't know that because it's just America that uses it because they pay the most for it. So they get all the Ozempic they like, right?
Wow.
Novo Nordisk, though,
Yep.
by itself, that company alone is paying 15% of all corporate taxes in Denmark at the moment. Because of how much Ozempic they're selling to Americans.
That's fantastic. And the corporate tax rate in Denmark is no joke.
Yes. I love that stuff.
That's fantastic.
So there we go. Okay, now, Dave, I know I'm leaning on you a lot here, but I've got some long sections coming up myself.
Okay.
I'd like you to talk about polling.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about polling.
Yeah.
So there have been some interesting, notable polls recently, and I'll just start with the two national polls that are getting a lot of attention. The first is the Fox News poll that shows Biden ahead by 1. What's significant about that is that that's a 3-point shift towards Biden since the last Fox News poll that was conducted. So as we have repeatedly emphasized, the point estimates in polls aren't as important as the movements within individual polls. That actually tells you something about what's going on, regardless of how biased or unbiased the poll's estimator is.
Can I throw one more on the fire there?
Yes, yeah.
Which is Echelon, which is another Republican.
Yes,
Fox is a Republican pollster, but Echelon is a Republican pollster.
Yeah.
Biden gained 4 points in that poll as well, and he's also ahead in that one by 1 point as well. But the key, as you say, is the trend.
Yes,
So,
yes. The other notable points about that poll were that it showed Biden gaining significantly with independents, which could possibly be something to do with Trump's conviction. I mean, it's long been speculated that that was where it would hurt Trump the most, was the effect that it had on independents. And also that it came out with protecting democracy was the single biggest concern that people had in that poll. And unsurprisingly, people who are concerned about protecting democracy favour Biden over Trump. So,
although there are a surprising number of Republicans who say that as well.
I don't think it's surprising at all. They think that democracy was stolen from them.
Yeah.
So that was the Fox poll. Now, that got a huge amount of attention, although, as has been pointed out, not from Fox News itself. It reported it in a very cursory way. It did get a lot of attention from Trump. Trump called it a garbage poll.
I bet he did.
This is great. Opportunity for Trump to renew his long-standing vendetta against Fox News's analytical teams.
Did he blame Paul Ryan, that dog, as he called in another one of his posts? He probably did.
Yeah, probably. But one that hasn't got as much attention was the last Marist poll. Now, Marist polls, these are the ones that the Biden team has been talking about a lot because they've pretty consistently shown Biden ahead. This one actually showed Trump ahead by, well, it showed it tied in a two-person field, and then it showed Trump ahead by 1 when others are included in the field. That's actually a slight movement towards Trump in this poll. But one of the things that this poll showed that was very interesting was the suggestion that things are actually returning to normal. Now, what I mean by that is this poll had shown Trump for months with a much smaller than is usually assumed lead with white voters, like a 6-point lead with white voters. That in this poll goes out to 12 points. Meanwhile, it had also showed Biden with a smaller than usually assumed lead with non-white voters of 11 points. This goes out to 18 points in that poll. Now, that, this is just one poll, but that would be an interesting suggestion that things are actually beginning to shake out in the polls. That these unusually strong figures that Biden's had with white voters, unusually strong figures that Trump has had with voters of colour, that this could be an artifact of polling taking place months and months out from the election, getting sort of unusual samples in the sense that people who are prepared to respond to polls that far out are unusual. It's possible that as polling gets more and more frequent we might start to see more and more normal demographic patterns emerging. Now, okay, on that point, USA Today and Suffolk had the kind of poll that I really like to see, which was an actual oversample poll of African-American voters. So this is 1,000 African-American voters, not only 1,000 African-American voters, but specifically in Michigan and Pennsylvania. And so this is a very, very valuable poll. We don't really see many polls specifically of minority groups, which means that when we see national polls, we're forced to rely on subsamples of 100 or 200 people, which have very big margins of error. And we almost never see an oversample poll of a key minority group in a key state, which is what we've got with these polls. So these polls are very interesting. These suggest that Trump's inroads with African-American voters have been a bit smaller than previously reckoned. For a start, actually, in these samples, you have more people saying that they voted for Trump in the last election than voted for him at the state level, which is not to say these people are lying, but it could be that the sample is a little bit skewed. Yeah. But even then, the kind of increase that Trump is looking at is something like 2% in Michigan, 5% in Pennsylvania. It's not that big, not the sort of 10 or 15 or 20% gains that have been touted in other polls. It also suggests, as we've suspected, there's a heavily gendered dimension to this, that you might actually get like 20% of African-American men supporting Trump in either of these states, but female black support for Trump is still very low. So the most that you're probably going to get is around 11 or 12%. That would still be high in historical terms, but we're not, given Trump got 8% of the African-American vote last time, it's not the kind of cataclysmic shake-up of the African-American vote that some have been projecting. Although 4-point gain, that could be enough to win an election. Yeah, which is what matters in the end. Some other interesting stuff from this poll: none of the 3 African-American candidates who have been talked about, that is Byron Donalds, Ben Carson, or our man Tim Scott, African-American voters say none of these would make them more likely to vote for Trump. In fact, probably less likely to vote for Trump. So I don't know if Trump is reading USA Today, but that might be something interesting to keep in mind. The suggestion that the Trump campaign has been pushing that not only did Trump's conviction really help Trump with angry voters, but that particularly helped him with African Americans because they're so used to injustice in the criminal justice system. Not only did an overwhelming number of respondents say no, in fact, Trump's conviction makes us less likely to vote for Trump, the majority of them also said that the suggestion that African Americans were more likely to vote for Trump because of his conviction is in fact offensive.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Now, that's something I could have told the Trump campaign. They wouldn't have listened to me. I wonder if they will listen to this poll. Yeah. Anyway, probably time for that fuckery to end a little bit. And there has been one other poll as well that's taken a deep dive into how people felt about the conviction, how it's actually likely to affect the way that they vote, and I'm even forgetting what this poll actually said. Can you remember anything from it?
This is the Politico poll?
This is the Politico. Well, this is the one that was covered in Politico. Let me just look this up.
Yeah, I've got a bit on that.
Yeah.
This is the one that said that the 22% said the conviction is important to how they'll vote.
Yes, yep.
And it makes them less likely to support Trump.
Yep.
Whereas 6% said the conviction is important to how they'll vote and it makes them more likely to support Trump.
Right, yes. And I just want to say on that point, that 6% that it's important to how they vote and more likely to vote for Trump, people, I think, wildly overestimated how big that group was. The number of times I was asked in the media, is this going to help Trump? Yeah, the level of Trump-brainedness that was just infecting the media. Like Maureen Dowd saying, well, my sister now says she's more likely to vote for. Yeah. That tells us more about Maureen Dowd's family than anything else. But as I said at the time, I think that, especially people who are scarred from, how far polls were off in 2016 and 2020. There's this perception in the media that the average voter is a moron, and B, that they're all just Trump voters waiting to be woken up, and that anything to do with Trump can wait. Everything helps Trump. Yes. Okay. Now, the observation that anything that happens to Trump makes Trump voters Trumpier. That observation is both true and analytically useless at this point. The question is, does it make people who wouldn't have voted for Trump otherwise actually vote for Trump?
Yeah.
And the idea that this conviction was actually going to push a lot of people into this camp was always a ridiculous fantasy, but one that was pushed very successfully by the Trump campaign onto the media, one that has not been borne out by the polls at all.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll say a few things about polls now as well.
Yep.
On the Fox polls, Echelon polls, these kinds of polls showing good news for Biden, there actually has been a result because of that, which I was expecting at some point in time.
Yeah.
And that is the 538 average has nudged ahead for Biden for the first time.
Really?
Since they started it in the last few months.
Yes.
It's ahead. He's ahead by 0.1.
Yeah.
40.6 to 40.5. Kennedy is 9.7 in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, they only just started the 538 averages in April.
Yep.
And Trump's been ahead the whole
Yep.
time. Would you care to guess? I had a look. Oh, he's not ahead Biden's not ahead in the Real Clear Politics.
No.
Trump's still ahead 46 to 45.5.
Yep.
They have a few garbage polls in Real Clear Politics.
Yep.
But would you care to guess the date when Trump moved ahead of Biden until now in the Real Clear Politics polling?
Is it like October 8th?
No, it was September 11.
Really?
That was the day that Trump moved ahead, and Real Clear Politics, he hasn't been behind since. 538, he's behind by 0.1 today because of the Fox News poll that pushed it. So that's an interesting little thing, and just for those who are comparing, back to 2020, on this day in 2020, Biden was not ahead by 0.1. He was ahead by 8.9.
Yes.
So that's a point of comparison to what ended up being a squeaker.
Yeah.
So just bear that in mind, which is why I say that it's one of many reasons why I say at this point in time Trump has the advantage. It was also one really bad poll for Biden this week, which I wouldn't normally just mention just one poll, but it's the poll, the Seltzer poll.
Oh,
the gold standard poll, the poll which is never
the
wrong.
most credible one in the country.
Yeah, the one that's always
Was
right.
this like 16 points for Trump or something?
18 points for Trump.
Points.
Now, this is in Iowa we're talking about, okay? Then there's no question that Trump's going to win Iowa.
Yes, yeah.
But as a point of comparison, Trump won in 2020 by 8 in Iowa.
And at this point,
Trump was ahead by 1.
Yes, yeah.
So Trump's gained 17 points.
Yes,
Now, there are third-party voters now, third-party candidates now that there weren't in 2020, and they are a factor. RFK got 9% in this poll.
Yep.
Chase Oliver, they're finally starting to poll Chase Oliver, got 2% in this poll. But Trump was ahead 50 to 32. Now there are a couple of reasons why you would note this, because like I said, we're not talking Iowa here.
Yeah.
What we're talking is Wisconsin.
Yes.
Which is kind of close to Iowa.
Next door.
Yeah. It's Wisconsin's very different from Iowa. Let's not key ourselves. And Minnesota, for that matter, is also in play potentially. But if you're normally Wisconsin would be 7 or 8 points more Democrat than Iowa. Like not 18 points. That's a concern when it's 18 points.
Yes.
What's also a concern is, given what you just talked about, is that the last time they polled, the Seltzer poll, was in February, and Trump was ahead by 15, 48 to 33. Now he's ahead 50 to 32. So he's now doing better than he did after his conviction.
Yes.
He's gained 2 points.
Yes.
So I'm not saying it's because of the conviction. That was 4 months ago. A lot's happened since then.
Yeah.
But still, it's just, it raises an eyebrow.
Now, on that point as well, because you mentioned Minnesota.
Yes.
So if you look up the 538 polling average in Minnesota, it shows it's a 2-point race, which, given that Biden won that by 8 points back in 2020, albeit Trump only lost it by 1 point in 2016. So it's not, even though it is the longest voting Democratic state, it's been Democratic since 1964, I think.
I got no idea.
It's been no, because it went Republican in 1972. Since 1984.
Sure.
Anyway, it's the longest voting Democratic state, but it's not the most Democratic state out there.
If that's right, by the way, that would be very strange that the first time it went Democratic was in Ronald Reagan's wipeout election.
The one state. Yeah, because it was Walter Mondale.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it might be since 1976. I don't know. Sorry, I'm tripping over myself here.
It's all good. A long time.
It's the longest voting Democratic state because all of the rest of the states went red in, well, it wasn't red back in those days. It was blue.
Yes, it was.
It was referred to as Reagan's swimming pool of blue in 1984. But that doesn't, like I can remember in 2004, Democrats were afraid that they would lose it. Like there have been a lot of close calls in Minnesota. Now, admittedly, when you have a look into that, it is dominated by McLaughlin polls.
Yeah.
Which are Trump campaign polls.
Yeah.
And the last one I saw that was not a McLaughlin poll, which was like Minnesota Star Tribune, Biden by 4 points. That's still like that's half of what he won it by in 2020. The other state to keep an eye on in that respect is Virginia, where I don't think 538 has a poll average, but if you look at the last few, it is low single digits to Biden. There you've actually got McLaughlin polls with Biden up by a few points, but some very respectable ones like Roanoke University, that's Biden by 2. Last Fox News poll there was Biden by 2. That is very, very close. And my friend and colleague Chris Pepper-Neff pointed out, in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer is going to be a very effective campaign surrogate for for Biden. But who's going to do that for him in Virginia? Not Mark Warner. Youngkin, if anything, could be a pretty effective surrogate for Trump in Virginia. A lot of that shift in the Northern Virginia vote over the last few elections was Latinos voting Democratic. If Trump is making serious inroads into them, then that could be, jeopardized. So it's just worth noting there that, okay, these are not very heavily polled states. Maybe if they were more heavily polled, it would look different. But at the moment, just based on the polling that we have, both of those states are closer than Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, or Florida, right? So states that have actually been regarded as swing states, which means that it might not be as simple as Biden just has to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all of which do look winnable for him. If he's going to lose one of those states, he needs something else somewhere else, and it's not clear what that is going to be.
Yeah, well, if he loses Virginia, he needs more than Arizona.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be a problem. By the way, before you finish his disaster poll with Seltzer, I didn't mention the approval ratings. Biden has a 28% approval rating in Iowa, but under 35s in Iowa, his approval rating is 15%.
Whoa.
That's not great, even in Iowa. The only good news is that 82% of RFK supporters say they can still be persuaded, so Biden could potentially still win those voters, as can Trump for that matter.
Yes.
And these are small sample sizes as well.
I also just want to point out one of the most striking things about the polls this year is when we've looked at 538 poll averages in previous elections, it's always been things like 48 to 45 or 46 to 44, 49 to 43. Blah, this time it's 40 to 40.
Yeah.
Even with 9% of RFK in there, that's a huge amount of volatility. And this brings me to some analysis I've been seeing, which I don't know where it's coming from, but it's absolute garbage. So Patrick Healy in the New York Times was saying, and this is like, I thought that this form of analysis had actually been phased out because it was so embarrassing, but no, good to see that it lives on, where he's saying, so Biden's in trouble. You know why? I call it the spring decision threshold. Look back at other elections. Spring's the time they've decided that, hey, I'm just not going to vote for this guy. Look back at Carter and George H.W. Bush. Now, first of all, this is not a good description of what polls actually looked like back then. Like, yeah, Carter was behind, but he'd been behind for quite a long time. The polls, a poll was conducted by the Washington Post in June 1992. Actually had Ross Perot leading.
Yes.
And it had H.W. Bush second. It had Bill Clinton on 25%.
Yes.
It's this kind of, as I say, I thought this form of analysis was being phased out because it was just too embarrassing in the face of the amount of data that we have. There's just really breezy kind of making up electoral laws on the fly. I call it the spring decision threshold.
Well,
yeah. And then, of all people, this then gets picked up by Jesse Waters on Fox News.
Of course it did.
Hours before the release of the new Fox News poll showing Biden ahead, Waters is saying, with the same kind of completely fake authority, oh, well, if you look at the polls, usually it's over by this time of the year.
Yeah.
It doesn't change at all after June, which is, among other things, forgetting what happened in the 2020 election, forgetting what happened in the 2016 election.
Yeah.
Yeah, just ask President Hillary Clinton where the polls can actually change. It's like, I would have thought if you're doing any kind of comparative historical analysis at all of this election, when you have it tied basically on 40 points apiece, that should look way, way more volatile to you than, just about any other election that we've seen. Put it this way, you shouldn't be using the 2012 election or like the 1984 election as your template for what is going to happen this time.
No.
Yes.
I was just, I was going to make the point, just to reiterate what I just said a second ago, that it was 8.9 points on this day in 2020.
Yeah.
And there was definitely 8.9 points on the election day. And I'm just flicking through here to see what it was in 2016. It was on June 21. It was... Oh, no. That can't be right. Oh, no. These are probabilities.
Okay,
Forget it. No, okay.
Forget it.
Don't worry about it. But it was a lot. It was a lot. Okay. Also, on the black vote, I'll just reiterate what you just said before. We were speaking to, on Planet America last week, someone who I trust quite a bit, the guy called Josh Doss, who does private polling, like high quality private polling of the black vote. And look, he used to work for Kamala Harris, so you might think, he's biased. But I think this guy is the real deal. And what he was saying to us, both on and off air, is that he's seen absolutely no evidence of Trump gaining any votes. He said, but what he has seen a lot of evidence for is black voters not turning out. He says that is the concern for Biden.
I have not seen a single African-American analyst say that there's been an explosion in black support for Trump. Seen a lot of white analysts suggest that for all kinds of reasons. But I haven't seen a single African-American analyst buy into that. Yeah, most of the time what they say is, yes, it's apathy towards Biden and support for Trump are two very different things.
Yeah. Okay. Looking at time, maybe I might save some of this polling stuff. I'll do a couple of quick things, and I might save one of the bigger ones for later on, for next week.
Okay.
Just a few basic trends.
Yeah.
There's some more polling on double haters.
Yes.
Pew had a graph come out this week. I'll put it up now, showing that 25% of the electorate are double haters at the moment, which is the highest number since they started counting in 1988.
I love that this has become the term of 2024.
Double haters.
The year of the double haters.
Yes.
Yeah.
For those who are wondering, Clinton-Trump was 20%. I read on Twitter, actually, that apparently Australia is currently 35%, which just shows the difference between Australia and America.
Yes,
Because you wouldn't say now is a particularly double hater period for Australia. It's not like people love the candidates.
The term has actually been really misapplied in Australia, because in the US, what's significant about that is the strength of party loyalty and party identity, which usually translates into support for the candidate. In Australia, where there is nothing like an analogous sense of party loyalty or party identity, and where the two parties' primary votes are basically lower than they ever have been in Australia, I don't think it actually makes sense to use the emotional language of double haters.
Fair enough.
Right? Given that the primary vote of the major parties in Australia has been in steep decline since 2016, what we're just talking about is people who are looking for alternatives and who are effectively remaking the Australian electoral system.
Yeah.
The traditional categories of Australian political analysis are increasingly difficult to apply because of this declining primary vote. I don't think double haters is the right term, though, because people on the left in Australia, they don't like Peter Dutton, but they don't hate him in the same way. To anything like the same extent that Liberals hate Trump. Similarly, a lot of Conservatives are apathetic towards Anthony Albanese, but they don't despise him in the way they despise Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I think it's inappropriate emotional language for Australia.
Fair enough. I should talk about people not liking Joe Biden very much. Monmouth had an enthusiasm poll. 48% are enthusiastic about the Biden-Trump contest. 26% very, 22% somewhat enthusiastic. That's up from 27% enthusiastic in December.
Yeah.
39% in April. That's not very enthusiastic.
No.
But if we break it down by party,
Republicans.
Republicans are 71%.
They want the rematch. They want redemption.
That's right.
Yeah.
71% remain much more enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Democrats, 46% are enthusiastic for the contest. That's the issue. And independents, 34% are enthusiastic. I don't blame you, independents.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest gap we've seen for some time. I mean, having said that, obviously, Democrats are motivated by hating Trump rather than liking Biden. We know that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave the old people, young people polling because there's some interesting polling there.
Yes.
I'll leave that, but maybe for Chaz Unleashed, maybe not. We'll see. But I'll say one more thing about polling, which is I think one of the least covered aspects of this election, which I'm finding interesting, is because of the likely voter, not so likely voter dynamic we're seeing. The potentiality that the Democrats have screwed themselves by putting automatic voter registration in as many states as possible. I talked about Nevada last time around. I didn't realize the same thing happened in Pennsylvania as well. And in Pennsylvania in the last few years got automatic voter registration through Democrats. And the new registrants are affiliated with Republicans over Democrats by 6 percentage points.
This is the important thing to remember about American politics. There are no permanent advantages. Right? The Electoral College, that's not a permanent advantage for Republicans. Biden could win the Electoral College this year while losing the popular vote. Similarly, the idea that big turnout always advantages Democrats, not true, right? All of these things vary by circumstance. There are no permanent advantages.
Yep. Before I want to talk a bit more about the campaign generally, but before I do that, we've got lots of little stories which we're trying to squeeze in today. Do you want to work the Pentagon story in here or
no?
Okay, don't worry about it. Okay, let's go on with the campaign.
Yes.
All right. A lot's happened this week, which I'd like to talk bits and pieces about. First of all, the viral videos, which we covered on Planet America on Wednesday. These are the old person videos of Biden, which have become a thing again. They go through phases, and we're going through another phase where literally every day there is another video. On Planet America, I discussed the parachutes video of Biden wandering off to speak to a parachutist at the G7. Biden being led off stage at his fundraiser by Obama. Biden touching foreheads with the Pope when close talking to him. Biden not dancing during the Juneteenth celebrations. Each of these were like a day or two apart from each other. And each of them were their own little sort of boomlet. Since then, that was Wednesday. Since then, we've seen Biden speaking gibberish for 2 seconds. We've seen Biden falling asleep while watching Nessun Dorma. It just goes on and on and on. All of them, Karine Jean-Pierre is calling these cheap fakes. And she's implying that they're manipulated in some way. I'll just play what she has to say.
They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith. And some of your news organization have been very clear, have stressed that these the right-wing critics of the president have a credibility problem because of the fact checkers have repeatedly caught them pushing misinformation, disinformation. And so we see this, and this is something coming from your part of the world, calling them cheap fakes and misinformation.
I personally think that's the wrong angle for her to take because they're not fake.
No.
They're not these are clearly real videos, right? They're often decontextualized. They're often cropped. But they're real.
We're not talking about AI generated shit.
No, we're not talking about MLK coming back.
No.
Sadly.
And I mean, it's worth pointing out that all video involves editing.
Yes.
All video involves choices or at least availability of certain shots, angles. You are never going to get a complete picture from a video, from any video of anything, unless you get to see, every angle possible, which you just don't.
Yeah. Now I'll make a few quick points about these I didn't make on Planet America on Wednesday. The first of which is, I think an important issue to note is that these videos are nothing.
Yes.
That the standard for problematic is now laughably low.
Yes.
Like when these videos started earlier back in 2021, they started in 2020. The standard used to be when one of the major candidates has a complete brain freeze or loses the ability to speak.
Yes, yeah.
That's a video that we all laugh at and go, oh, look how old they are.
Yeah.
Now it's coming down to someone standing still for a while.
Yeah.
Or someone going off to talk to a parachutist instead of staying with their group. And that's a huge story. That's a front page story in the New York Post, right? It's you can be a decent president while being a little bit weird and doddery.
Yeah.
That's the new standard, is being a little bit weird and doddery.
Yeah.
I think they're overreaching.
Yeah.
I think unless you are on board with the Kool-Aid, I think you look at these videos and you go, well, this is just nothing.
I can see potential for a backlash among older voters.
Yeah.
Like you're basically making fun of people like us.
One of the polls which I just skipped past is exactly that. That's coming.
Right.
But anyway, but yeah.
But by the way, I'm actually surprised that Biden hasn't gone a bit more populist with the falling asleep during Nessun Dorma. Like, I fell asleep during the opera. Singing in a foreign language? What the hell's that?
You could have tried that. I mean, I think the comedy of falling asleep during None Shall Sleep, I think it's hard to beat.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. But anyway, I think there is potential for a backlash. Look, Biden's going to give him something good soon. He does do this every now and then. But if they just keep on berating him with this garbage, I think it starts to inoculate him in the way that Trump's now inoculated from tweets.
Yes.
When Trump first started tweeting like a madman, people went crazy. And now he's just literally just tweeting just complete garbage and no one gives a stuff.
No.
Because it's just overused.
Yes.
Another thing I just want to point out is there's a lot of zooming in going on these videos. I'm not talking the actual videos. I'm talking about the responses to the videos.
Yep.
Like, for instance, with the Pope video, there's I won't show you because the people who are listening won't be understand at all because there's no audio component.
Yes, yeah.
But there was a lot of people who were zooming in on Javier Milei, his reaction, where he did this like double take. And we're seeing this a lot. People zooming on double takes and people looking a bit weird almost every single time. Just think about this the next time you see one of these.
Yeah.
Think to yourself, are they looking at Biden or are they looking at the camera? Because on every single time, it looks to me like they're reacting to the camera.
Yes.
Like Javier Milei Milei was clearly to me trying to jump out of the photobomb.
Yes,
He noticed, oh my God, I'm photobombing the Pope and Biden. I don't get out of the way because he saw the camera and then he jumped. Like, you don't jump because Biden's doing something weird. You jump because you're in the shot. Right? And the Nessun Dorma one, there was a guy who was looking right down the barrel of the camera, disapproving, and people zooming on him going, oh, look at his reaction to Biden. No, it's his reaction to the camera, to someone filming in the middle of a concert.
Yes.
It's just, and so just think about that the next time you see these zoom ins.
Yes,
right? I think it's often about the camera person, not about Biden.
Yes.
Another point that's worth making is this is where Trump has an advantage, which is he has enough hack supporters on Twitter.
Yes, yeah.
Like Ian Miles Chong, Robbie Starbuck, Miranda Devine, Australia's own. People who will reliably promote these clips every single day without fail, with maximum bad faith, and they never get bored of it somehow. That just those people and their supporters can make a clip viral because there's enough of them with enough followers, right? And that is an advantage that Trump has that Biden does not. Biden doesn't have the same hack squad. I'm not saying that Biden doesn't have hack supporters, but doesn't have the same reliable Twitter day in, day out, singing the Hosanna chorus, giving him exactly what he wants in the way that the Ian Miles Chongs and Robbie Starbucks
he does not have the tribe of half men who are completely devoted to this shit.
That's lovely. The tribe of half men.
Yeah.
That's going in the description. I also think there's an interesting psychological phenomenon here, which is worth noting, which is that Biden no longer seems to have the benefit of the doubt when it comes to old videos. Like he's just like, I think often with these videos, you see something which could be, it's really ambiguous. It's usually a distant shot or whatever.
Yeah.
It's all grainy or whatever. And you could interpret it anyway, but the person at the top, the tweet interprets it in the worst possible way.
Yes.
And people roll with it.
Yeah.
Because they just don't give Biden the benefit of the doubt anymore.
Yes.
And that is a negative for him as well, I feel, that there's almost no point arguing with these videos and going, well, that's garbage. It's clearly garbage because there have been so many for so long. It feels like you're holding back the tide with your hands.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that is an effect that, I don't know if they're intentionally going for it, but I think that's what's been established.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's an interesting phenomenon as well. My other question, and this is my question to you, is what is the strategy, though, from the RNC? Because it's the RNC who's pushing this. It's the RNC Rapid Response that pushes almost all these videos.
Yes.
Normally, you wouldn't be going this early on this kind of stuff.
No.
This is very early to go for this, right? Yeah. You'd be saving this for October normally, which is what they did with Clinton, with Hillary, like with her health stuff.
Yes.
They didn't get that wheel spinning until September, right? This gives Biden the chance to inoculate himself, I said. So why would they do that?
Could it be that Trump cleared out everyone who actually had significant campaign experience and replaced them with loyalists and family members who didn't?
That could
be that?
It could be incompetence.
Yeah,
you're right. No, I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah.
What I was going to say, my take, and I think your take sounds better actually.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you my take, which has now been superseded, is that I thought, assuming they were competent, that they were trying to bully Biden into withdrawing from the public.
Oh.
To go, every time you walk out, we're going to give you one of these videos.
Yeah, but he wouldn't.
So you should stay back in the White House where you're safe, because these videos I don't think hurt him, because I think they're nothing, and they're circulated around Republicans who aren't going to vote for him anyway on Twitter. Outside Twitter, they don't exist.
No.
Right? And that's where the voters are.
Yeah.
And so I don't think these videos actually hurt him.
No.
But I'm sure, hyper aware of these videos. And I thought maybe they're trying to scare him into trying to play it safe. And if he plays it safe, that will hurt him.
Yes, yeah.
That will hurt him amongst actual voters.
He's too much of a veteran to fall for that.
Yeah.
If that was if you look at how hyperactive he's actually been recently.
Yeah, he's really
look at
the
number of overseas trips he's had recently. Like whatever, however much good or not good you think has come from those trips, he's clearly trying to show that he is the president and he's doing presidential things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think you're right. It's incompetence. Yeah. Okay. A couple other campaign things.
Yes.
Just an observation. Trump spoke to CEOs the other day trying to get their support. Interesting.
Yes.
There was an interesting quote from Andrew Ross Sorkin, which I'll play you.
I will say I was surprised. I spoke to a number of CEOs who I would say walked into the meeting being Trump supporter-ish or thinking that they might be leaning that direction, who said that he was remarkably meandering, could not keep a straight thought, was all over the map, and that they, which may be not surprising, but was interesting to me because these were people who I think might have been actually predisposed to him and actually walked out of the room less predisposed to him, actually predisposed to thinking this is not necessarily, as one person said, this may not be any different or better than a Biden thought if you're thinking that way.
Now you might go, well, he's partisan. Actually, I don't think he's super partisan, but you might think, oh, he's a bit partisan, whatever, commentator. Yes. But I think that observation is confirmed by the fact that Trump, a day later, posted this. Business executives and shareholder representatives should be 100% behind Donald Trump. Anybody that's not should be fired for incompetence. And when Trump overreaches like that, you go,
yes, yeah.
He knows something. That's based on something. So I thought that was interesting.
Should be fired.
Another thing.
The people who are in charge of hiring and firing should fire themselves.
That's right.
If they don't support Trump.
Another thing, Biden has bought $50 million worth of ads for June, and there isn't much of June left. So that's a lot of ads. It's the first really big buy of this campaign, and this is the main ad that he bought those ads for.
In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working, lowering healthcare costs and making big corporations pay their fair share. This election is between a convicted criminal who's only out for himself and a president who's fighting for your family.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
One of the things that's notable about that ad is the two things that they emphasize as positives for Biden.
Yep.
Lowering healthcare costs and making corporations pay their fair share.
Yes.
Both of those things are an acknowledgement that just relentless pumping up how good the economy is hasn't been working.
Yeah.
And they should stay away from that one. Talking about lowering healthcare costs, that's interesting because that hasn't been something that's featured heavily up until this point, but it's clearly something that could be a positive for them. If people have, if amidst all their negative experiences of the economy, if people have actually experienced declining healthcare costs, then that would be a positive for Biden.
You know who has experienced declining healthcare costs?
Who?
Senior citizens.
Yes, okay.
Medicare drug prices is where they've saved money.
Yeah.
Famously. That's the one area where he's really actually made an impact.
Making corporations pay their fair share. People on the left have been screaming at Biden for years to actually make economic populism a real part of his, persona, which he can because he has actually been making moves towards changing the taxation structure in ways that are not going to help the richest and the corporations, but could potentially help the middle and working classes. And there's been a lot of calls for Biden to more effectively own that, to go full FDR, say, I welcome the hate of the elites. One of the interesting things about the Fox News poll was that in terms of people's preferences, standing up to the elites, first of all, was not a high one. It was actually significantly down the list. But second, Trump and Biden were considered even on the question of standing up to elites.
Okay.
So that is not something that's owned by Trump. And I think there's this increasing recognition that Trump represents his own kind of elite. It is, there's certainly space for Biden to do a lot more with this than he actually has.
And of course, this was the 2012 strategy of Obama.
Yes.
Like the staying up for elites.
And it's important. So I've concentrated on the, because that's an ad of two halves. There's the black and white, Trump's a criminal, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's been widely recognized that's not going to be enough. So they do need to have this colorful, positive stuff. I don't know if that's going to work, but it's probably a welcome change in direction. Yeah,
well, the thing which I want to ask you about this is that, number one, I should just say also, I thought it was interesting the way they made the criminal thing, not about he's a criminal, but he's a criminal who's worried about himself.
Yes.
Whereas Biden's worried about you.
Yes.
I think that's a smart move.
Yes.
To not make it just, he's a criminal.
Yeah.
That's what Hillary Clinton did.
Yes.
She just did, he's bad.
Yeah.
Whereas they're saying he's bad, and because he's bad, he doesn't care about you.
Yes.
I thought that was smart. But what I want to ask you is this. Once again, like I said about the age thing, you wouldn't normally pull the felon card until September, October.
Yeah.
They're pulling it early. So is that ruthlessness or is it desperation? Ruthlessness would be they're trying to define Trump nice and early and go for the kill like Obama did with Romney.
Yes.
Right? That's ruthlessness. Desperation, this is real early for them. They're playing the criminal card because they've got nothing else and they're just doing whatever they can. And putting in this massive buy might distract a little bit from the fact that Biden is the only one who's advertising so far. Like as of the end of May, Biden spent $13 million on TV ads compared to Trump's zero.
Yes.
Trump had money problems before. He doesn't have money problems anymore.
No.
He's currently raising lots of money. Those ads are going to come from Trump. But Biden has only just gotten in the lead by 0.1.
Yeah.
And so are they going full guns blazing because they're desperate or because they're just trying to find him?
I don't think those things are mutually exclusive.
It's true.
Yeah, I think it's both.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay. Another thing, this is just just when we're talking about this kind of like tactics, we don't do much tactics talk.
Yeah.
Someone made a point the other day which resonated with me. I've forgotten who it was. It was a blogger. What's Biden's slogan? Like, we all know Trump's slogan.
Yeah.
Like, if you go to Biden's website and you see merch that says, "Together we will defeat Trump again," which is a terrible bit of copy. But I don't think that's his slogan. I hope it's not his slogan.
Well, what? So last time was Build Back Better.
Yeah. What's his slogan? Like,
yeah, good point.
It just seems emblematic of a campaign that doesn't do the basic things.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and it explains as well part of the reason. I don't want to give this too much.
Yeah.
But it's, I think, indicative of why Biden might be struggling to reach low information voters.
Yeah, yeah.
They're the people you make slogans for, not for people who are obsessed with politics.
Yeah.
It's for the people who only hear one thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You want them to hear that slogan. There is, please don't let them hear, "Together we will defend Trump again."
Yeah. I mean, if I was to come up with a slogan that would sort of, define what I've seen so far from the Biden campaign, it'd be something like, yeah, okay.
Look, that's better than "Together we will defeat Trump again."
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I just throw that out there. Do you have anything to say about that? I don't expect you would. No, just an observation. No. Okay. Now, a few campaign moments of Trump, which I want to talk about. Number one, Detroit. We talked on Planet America about Trump's AstroTurf meeting with the black community in the Detroit Black Church, where he filled up with white, non-local conservatives.
Yes.
But I wanted to draw attention to one particular aspect of it.
We'll bring back public safety and defend our communities for law-abiding American citizens. Look, the crime is most rampant right here and in African-American communities, and more people see me and they say, "Sir, we want protection. We want police to protect us. We don't want to get robbed and mugged and beat up or killed because we want to walk across the street to buy a loaf of bread."
Sir.
A lot of African Americans are coming up to him and saying, Sir. That's going to go down really well.
Yeah, like, I'm not sure they're going to love that, but that's not the reason I brought it up. The reason I brought it up is not only is crime improving a lot across America, we talked about that on Planet America today, Detroit in particular is looking up at the moment.
Yeah.
In 2023, their city population grew for the first time since 1957.
Yes.
Crime is plummeting, double-digit percentage drops in shootings last year, for instance.
Yeah, yeah.
The fewest homicides since 1966 in Detroit. Home prices are rising faster in Detroit than any other city in the nation.
Yeah. To be clear, that's rising from one of the lowest bases in the nation. But yes, that is a remarkable
fact. But it's been the lowest base for some time and going down.
Actually seeing pressure on house prices is a remarkable thing in itself, given that for a long time, 25% of the city was covered with prairie grass, which had basically been reclaimed. You could easily pick up a pretty decent house for about $15,000. That is a pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're out of the woods. I'm not saying Biden's got anything to do with it either.
No.
I'm just saying that it's a fact that Detroit is not the city that it was 2 or 3 years ago.
No, it's not.
And that,
let alone what it was 20 years ago, which is, that sounds a lot more like what Trump is talking about when, there'd be 600 murders a year. Yeah. That sort of thing.
I think it's worth acknowledging.
Yes. Yeah. No, in Detroit, there's now a solid corridor of kind of normal commercial activity all the way from downtown to midtown, which was something that hadn't been present for a long time.
Yeah. The next thing I want to talk about is Trump's policy of no tax on tips.
Yes. Okay.
Which I think
about this.
I think is an interesting one. Now he announced I'll just play the clip.
When I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips. We're not going to do it, and we're going to do that right away, first thing in office, because it's been a point of contention for years and years and years, and you do a great job of service, you take care of people, and I think it's going to be something that really is deserved.
First of all, I'm guessing that no one at that rally is a worker who relies on tips. Second, I'm guessing that no one at that rally actually gives tips to people who serve them.
Oh, maybe not the rally. I think Republicans are probably the kinds of people who would give tips, wouldn't they?
Yeah, not Trump supporters.
Probably not Trump supporters.
Not people at Trump rallies.
No,
They're the
enough,
kinds of people who always have a reason not to give tips.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. Okay, I've got a few thoughts about this, but jump in whenever you want. But I'll just give some thoughts. First of all, it's interesting policy because the easiest thing to do to help tip workers would be to raise the tip minimum wage.
Yes.
Which is the minimum wage is $7.25.
Yeah.
The tipped minimum wage is $2.13.
It's fucking it's a scandal.
Yeah, and Trump's not doing that.
No.
Right. It's an interesting area he's in, though, because in the past, most people presumably didn't declare their tips because they're in cash.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas now 95% of tips are electronic, so you have to report them.
Yep.
So this is kind of a growing issue.
Yes, yeah.
Like every sort of year becomes more of an issue. Although, admittedly, apparently the biggest tips are still cash. Who does this affect? If you're single and your income is below $12,950, you don't have to even file for taxes.
Yes,
okay, so if you're earning less than that, this means nothing.
Yes.
And if you earn slightly more than that, this means pretty much nothing.
Yes, yeah.
All right. If you're the head of a household and your income's below $19,400, you don't have to file for taxes either.
Yeah.
Right? So how many servers out there and hospitality workers would earn more than that? I mean, there'll be some.
Yeah.
The average tip worker reported only earning $6,249 in tips as of 2018.
Yeah.
So when you consider the tip minimum wage on top of that,
a
lot of them would not get to $12,000 or $19,000. No. So lots of the poorest tipped workers won't be helped by this at all. It does affect some people, though. I mean, 6.1 million Americans paid $38 billion in taxes for tips in 2018. So that's someone, right? And it'll be great for them.
Yeah.
Sure. Like, I'm not knocking it as a policy, by the way, because I mean, like those people are not filthy rich.
No.
They're still working class people. Yeah. And servers seem to be responding pretty well to this so far.
I did talk with some hotel workers yesterday, some service workers here in Las Vegas about how that is playing with them. And Anne-Marie, about 6 people told me that would change their vote. That is enough to make them switch from voting Democrat to Republican if Donald Trump is promising something like that to them.
I believe that. Like, I actually think it would be very effective, especially in a place like Nevada, swing state.
Yeah.
But my next question is, why are we just worrying about servers? Because there's lots of low-paid workers out there.
There are.
Yeah, like, why do waiters deserve more breaks than, say, fast food servers at McDonald's who don't get tips?
Yes, yeah.
It
it did seem a very Nevada-focused policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next thing is, what is a tip? Because all of a sudden, all income is going to be being declared as tips.
Yes.
Like, that's what's going to happen, right?
That's true, yeah.
The amount of tip tax income that the government's going to forgo is going to balloon, I would expect.
Yep.
The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget estimate this would reduce revenue by $150 to $250 billion over 10 years.
Yes, yeah.
But they emphasize it depends on how fast tip income grows.
Yes.
And that could be $500 billion over 10 years, easily.
We've also got to make a point so obvious that, well, it's the sort of point that doesn't get made very often. President can't do this.
Yes. It needs
Congress would need to do this.
Yes, Congress would need to do this.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Yes,
Getting this through Congress would be a far more complicated task.
Yeah, that's probably true. Another question which hasn't been answered is, does this affect payroll tax? Because even poor people pay payroll taxes.
Yes, yeah.
Trump didn't say. I'm betting not.
No.
But if he is exempting payroll taxes, he should say so. But obviously the politics of this is very clear. Like we've already said, Nevada, right? Okay, but so let me ask you before I say anything more. What do you think of this policy?
I think it's a clever announcement from Trump. I don't think it's anything more than that.
Okay.
I would not expect to see this become the light of day any more than any other hundreds of Trump proposals which have never got anywhere near actually becoming law. This would need to get through Congress. That is going to be very, very hard.
If it got through Congress, do you think it's a good idea?
Probably. But it doesn't get at the structural issue that you were talking about, where it is really... it's putting the structural issue off.
Yeah. I'd say one more thing, which I did mention on Play America on Wednesday, but it's worth emphasizing. Yeah. The most brilliant part of this, as often is the case with Trump, is the marketing.
Yes, yeah.
Which is Trump has been saying every time you leave a tip for the next 5 months, put on the receipt, vote for Trump because there's no tax on tips. That's clever.
Yeah.
Because if you think about how effective that would be to see that written on the check if you're a server and to see that how many times over the next 5 months, it will hit you in a way an ad never would hit you. And these are people who work during nighttime. They work during primetime TV when the ads are running.
Yeah.
You don't hit them with ads.
Yes.
That's the way you hit these
great.
people.
So now Trump supporters will stop leaving no tip and start leaving like 1 cent tips. So vote for Trump, and there's even more where this is coming from.
they're your people you were referring to before.
Yes.
So I think it's a very clever idea from a marketing perspective, if nothing else. But the other reason I think is clever is exactly what we just said before, the ad, which you identified with. The point I was going to make, that one of Biden's two things he wants to emphasize is making corporations pay their fair share, right? Yeah. This here is an unabashedly pro-working class move.
Yes, yeah.
So when Biden, as we can see he's about to, knocks Trump because of his other tax policies, which are, there are two of them.
Yeah.
Cutting rich people's taxes, cutting corporate taxes.
Yes.
When Biden knocks him for that, Trump can just turn around and bring this up and go, I'm the guy who's trying to cut taxes for the waiters, for the working class. According to Pew in April 2023, they asked people what about the US tax system bothered them. The top two responses were 61% said that corporations didn't pay their fair share, and 60% said rich people don't pay their fair share. That is Trump's tax policy. Right there is what they hate. Compare that to 38% who are greatly bothered by their own tax burden. So that's what they care. They dislike Trump's tax policy. This may help inoculate him against those attacks. That is, I think, the cleverest part of all about this particular policy. Got any thoughts about any of that?
How do you think Biden's going to respond?
I don't know. I think he might just try and ignore it.
He could. Or he could just copy it.
I don't.
Except that
Trump's going to own this so much. I think it would look bad if he copies it.
Yeah. And also, I mean, Biden would acknowledge that it would have to go through Congress.
I'll tell you what he's going to do. I've already thought of it. Sorry, finish your point.
Part of the marketing of this is Trump is saying this is magically going to happen as soon as I'm president.
I'll tell you what Biden should do. Biden should do exactly what I just hinted at before. He should go $10 minimum wage, full stop for everyone.
Yes, yeah.
Like tomorrow.
Yes.
That's what Biden should do.
He should do, yes.
So he can say, I think that's the best way to respond.
Yes, yeah.
And with a view to $15 in 10 years or whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to skip past the next bit.
You can see the look of pain on his face when he has to skip past something.
But I do want to mention one more campaign thing, which is the immigration executive order.
Okay.
I did foreshadow this last week. It is indeed the declaration of a whole bunch of unauthorized immigrants being granted parole in place status.
Yes.
Who's it affect? It affects unauthorized immigrants who have been in the country for at least 10 years and are also married to US citizens and also do not pose a threat to public safety. They need to be verified as not posing a threat to public safety. There was some talk of it affecting over 1 million people last week. That's not the case. In its final form, it apparently applies to about 490,000 spouses and 50,000 undocumented stepchildren of the US citizens who came with the immigrants. Those immigrant children must be under 21 to qualify. The White House says most of the immigrants affected are Mexican nationals who have lived in the US for an average of 23 years. So these are exactly the kinds of people you want reform to assist. These people are obviously honest, hard workers. They've formed families. They're part of the community. They're not migrant criminals. None of that. So these are the people who everyone wants to assist. It's good politics from that perspective. What does it do? It does not. This is a really important thing to emphasize. I didn't mention this on Play America, but this does not get said enough. It does not give them any more long-term rights than they already have. every one of these people, when they marry an American, has the right to apply for a green card.
Yes.
Already.
Yes.
But what this does is it changes the process. It means for the next 3 years they're allowed to have work rights if they didn't already have work rights, and it protects them from deportation while they're applying for their green card. And they don't have to until now, they had to head to another country, their original country, for 10 years, up to 10 years to apply for that green card, which obviously none of them ever did, which is why they're still illegal 23 years later.
Yes.
Because it's in their interest to apply for a green card, but they don't want to leave their family for 10 years, which makes perfect sense.
Yep.
So this is actually a sensible bit of policy.
Yes.
In that you're trying to achieve the same results that Congress already allowed, but without this unnecessary cruelty, which not is only cruel to the immigrant, but cruel to their family and their often American child.
Yes.
Who's living in a broken family because of this stupid policy. So I think it's in everyone's interest from a policy point of view. Anything to say so far? No? Okay, all right. The White House have tried to sell this by saying President Biden believes that securing the border is essential. He also believes in expanding lawful pathways and keeping families together, and that immigrants who have been in the United States for decades, paying taxes and contributing to their communities, are part of the social fabric of our country. That's great logic. I agree with that logic. I agree with them there. It does single out migrants who are contributing to the community, like they said. It does keep families together, like they said. According to conservatives, that's important. And then also, if you're worried about migrant crime, these aren't your concern. But the problem is Biden's doing a terrible job of securing the border, which is the first part. That's the problem. And we all know that's the problem. That's going to make people less receptive to this good idea. Also, the other problem is that some of the critics are, I believe, potentially actually vampires. I'm referring to Stephen Miller, of course.
Yes.
He says, big news. Biden to announce an unconstitutional executive amnesty for illegal aliens during a border invasion and in the aftermath of multiple gruesome rapes and murders of Americans at the hands of Biden-freed illegals. This is an attack on democracy. Now, he's obviously a horrible person. We know this.
Have we ever shown the footage of him as a high school student giving a speech for class president where he's screaming about his school had a policy that students actually had to clean up after themselves after lunch?
No, we haven't shown this footage.
He was screaming about how we shouldn't have to do this when we've got janitors to do that job.
I've never seen this footage.
Oh, it is like...
Okay, if this footage exists and I can find it, it's going to go right here.
Am I the only one who is sick and tired of being told to pick up my trash? And we have plenty of janitors who are paid to do it for us.
That basically tells you everything you need to know about Stephen Miller and his general sort of outlook on the world.
I'm really, really hoping I just played that footage because I really want to see it.
Yes, yeah.
But, anyway, okay, so obviously these aren't murderers and rapists, but that's how Stephen Miller rolls.
Yep.
All right, the policy negatives. It does reinforce to would-be migrants that if they're willing to sneak in and hang around long enough, they will get green cards in the end.
Yeah.
Which is, that's a fact. It's incentives are always at play here.
Yes.
I think much more of a concern than that is that it incentivizes sham marriages.
Yes.
If you've been in America for 10 years and you don't have a criminal record, get married.
Yes.
And you get a green card. I can say, and I'm sure there would be people who would do that.
Yes.
So that is an issue, but there's always a negative to any policy.
Yes.
The politics of this. The American Business and Immigration Coalition says that Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia each has more than 100,000 voters who live in mixed status households.
Right.
They also have a bunch of people who want to crack down hard on the border. So I don't know how that balances out.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm sending you the video now.
Thank you very much. Yep. Excellent. Do you have any thoughts about this so far?
No.
Okay, well, I'm going to go to the legal section now, which is something which hasn't been talked about so much.
Yep.
Under Section 245 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, thank you, I've got that. Undocumented immigrants who have been granted parole may have their status adjusted to that of temporary legal residents. So that part, once they grant parole, them being able to stay in the country, temporary legal residence, that's 100% legal. Clearly legal. People say that's illegal are wrong. Clearly legal.
Yep.
The question is, can Biden give them parole? Section 1182 gives the president the power to grant parole, quote, on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. Significant public benefit? Definitely.
Yep.
Not breaking up families is significant public benefit. Urgent humanitarian reasons, depending on the migrant, where they came from might be urgent humanitarian reasons, but also we can presume that the families have an urgent humanitarian need to stay together maybe.
Yes.
I could see that argument being made.
Yep.
Is this on a case-by-case basis? I feel like that's where the legal challenge exists.
Yep.
Because, with a slip of the hand,
Yes.
giving 500,000 people parole is not a case-by-case basis.
No.
Having said that, there is precedent for this. Parole in place has been used since 2007 under W. Bush to protect the spouses of US military service members from deportation.
I see.
And that is also a category, not a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
So maybe they get away with it because of that. I don't know. But another issue here is that Biden's already using this power, this parole power, a lot. He's using it to parole Ukrainian migrants. He's using it to parole migrants from Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Haiti, 40,000 a month.
Yep.
We've talked about both those programs on Planet America and on PEP.
Yep.
Both of them have been challenged legally at the moment. 20 red states, though, were denied standing by a conservative judge to challenge some of these paroles.
Yep.
Because of standing reasons, which I'll explain that in a second. That was back in March. That guy was Drew Tipton, who they handpicked. He was one of those Kaczmarek type judges. They handpicked him, and even he didn't allow them didn't recognize their standing. So I think they've got a problem with standing.
Yeah.
What I'm referring to there is you need to prove that you're going to be hurt by some family not being separated.
Yes.
like who've been the immigrants been here for 23 years. They got a family. Who is that going to hurt?
Yeah. You've got to prove the state is going to be hurt by it.
How are you going to prove that? It obviously is going to help the state. So I think there's a chance that even if this is illegal, and I'm not convinced it is illegal, but I think it might be actually illegal, this. But even if it is illegal, but because of the case-by-case basis, I think there's a pretty good chance they're not going to get to court.
No.
Just because I don't think it's possible to find standing. So we'll see about that. But I think that is a really interesting legal aspect of this, which has not been talked about much.
No.
So you heard it here first on PEP.
Yes.
And, I should say, by the way, it does feel like a bit of a cheat to me that that parole was not designed for this purpose.
Yep.
It was designed for. It wasn't designed to be used retroactively.
Yes. Yeah.
It was designed for like emergency cases, like surgery or a witness in a trial or something. You know, it's So I do feel this is kind of a perversion of the original intent of Congress.
Yeah.
But they might still get away with it anyway.
Yep.
That's all I have to say about this. Do you have any thoughts about any of this? No. Okay. All right then. Your turn. Southern Baptists.
Okay. So the Southern Baptist Convention, it had a very flurry of activity at its convention, and there were two things that everyone was talking about. One was that it did not pass a constitutional amendment which would have excluded women from senior leadership positions. Nonetheless, women are excluded from senior leadership positions across most of the Southern Baptist Convention. But the second one, which is interesting from a broader political point of view, was that they passed a resolution effectively condemning IVF.
Yes.
Condemning reproductive technologies that involve the destruction of embryos.
Yep.
I think that they would theoretically not object to IVF if it didn't involve the destruction of embryos, but they are taking basically a fetal personhood point of view on this, that embryos can't be destroyed.
Can I just pick up on that?
Yes.
When you say theoretically they'd be open to it if it wasn't.
Yeah, and this is something that we talked about before, that you do get people making the argument that we don't actually have a problem with in vitro fertilization. What we've got a problem with is the way that it's practiced. It involves destruction of surplus embryos. If you can do it without destruction of surplus embryos, fine.
Are you about to get to the amendment or not? If you're not, then I should talk about it now.
Okay.
Yes. Because the reason I was pulling you up on that is that there actually was an amendment proposed at this convention to change the text of the resolution to assert that IVF could be used in a manner consistent with a pro-life position.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Such as transferring all embryos to the mother.
Yeah.
Right? So there's no destruction of embryos there.
Yeah.
The Southern Baptist Theology Seminary president, Albert Moeller, said, I think there is no way that IVF can be performed without huge moral error. And yet, I want to acknowledge there are applications of IVF that are more and less respectful of human dignity. The amendment was defeated in a vote, and his resolution to condemn IVF passed immediately afterwards.
Yes.
So they were given, someone called their bluff.
Yeah.
And they didn't endorse IVF even without embryo destruction.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so
yes.
go on.
Okay, so this is we've talked before about the way that the Southern Baptist position on abortion changed. Yeah. So when Roe versus Wade was passed, it was actually not opposed by the Southern Baptist Convention. And there were a couple of reasons for that. One was there was a lot more diversity within the Southern Baptist Convention back in those days on issues like abortion and exactly when human life begins. In the late 1970s, there was a right-wing takeover, which introduced a lot more uniformity around these questions. But the other thing was, as I pointed out many times before, back in the early 70s, Protestants saw this as a Catholic issue, which they wanted to have nothing to do with. And even to this day, it's actually very unusual to see a Protestant church complaining about something like IVF. It generally is the Catholics who've got much, much harder and clearer lines on the sanctity of life from the moment of conception. We're actually seeing an almost sort of full Catholicization now of the Southern Baptist Convention in this. So they're the first major Protestant organization to come out against IVF completely. Now, the Southern Baptist Convention, as I've also pointed out, doesn't quite have the political muscle that it once did. Southern Baptist Convention has 13 million members, which is a lot. It once had 17 million members. Back in the George W. Bush presidency, the Southern Baptist Convention was very much at the mainstream of the Christian right. There really, in some ways, isn't a mainstream of the Christian right anymore. And Pentecostals and Charismatics, as El Hardy will be able to tell us all about next week, are far more dominant now politically in this space. The Southern Baptist Convention has responded to this by moving sharply right on all kinds of issues. And I mean, because they're so big, there are always voices of moderation. There are always opposing voices, but they increasingly just get shut down. And Albert Moeller personally has a lot to do with this. This is somebody who sided with white celebrity atheists over his own brother pastors who were African-American in the Southern Baptist Convention on the issue of critical race theory. Right. Albert Moeller thought that it had to be destroyed, and he was siding with celebrity atheist figures on this over black Southern Baptist pastors. So, but even though they don't have the political muscle that they used to, this is still significant because it shows that actually IVF is not just going to go away as an issue. There's a significant part of the anti-abortion movement, both Protestant and Catholic, for whom IVF is an abomination, at least as it's currently practiced, and they are going to want to push to get rid of it. They don't see the point of having political power if you can't use it. And this to them is it's the main game. It's human life. It's the biggest issue that there is. So as much as Republicans can say, look, IVF is completely safe, none of us are opposed to IVF, the fact is that there is a big Republican constituency that's opposed to it. The issue is not going to go away. It is easy to imagine states where there will be enough of a critical mass to really make this an issue. It's easy to imagine courts where there's going to be enough of a critical mass to make this an issue. So this is an indicator that this is not going away.
My question to you is, what happens when the leadership and every single person here was in the leadership. Like there was 10,000 people there, but representing 13,000 churches, right? So it's one person per church.
Yes, yeah.
Well, less than.
Yeah.
What happens when the leadership doesn't match the flock? Like there was a Pew poll last month that found white evangelical Protestants said access to IVF was a good thing, 63% to 9%.
Yeah, well, this is a really interesting question because the question of what happens when the leadership doesn't match up with the flock is a problem that has politically plagued churches, not just in the US, but across the Western world for more than 100 years. But the way that problem usually works is that the leadership tends to be more kind of cerebral and liberal than the followers. This is actually a rare example of where the leadership are to the right of the followers. So I don't know what's going to happen here because we've seen with many churches the problem in the past of where the leadership is to the left of the followers, and what tends to happen is that the church goes into decline. Or, you know, there's all kind of splits that happen in the church. I don't know, in a right-wing church where the leadership is even further to the right than the followers, what's actually going to happen with this question.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing, which is to just with the men-only pastors bit, which we sort of brushed past.
Yeah.
Like when you said they voted down the amendment, they did.
Yeah.
But 61% of them supported the change.
Yes.
But you need 2/3 to vote something up. And just I want to emphasize as well that it's not just that they don't have men pastors. But they're banned.
Yes.
This was to like double ban them. This is like a super
There
banning.
are women pastors, but they're not allowed into senior pastor roles.
Okay.
Yeah. And churches that elevate them to senior pastor roles get expelled.
Yeah, I was going to say, the SBC expelled the First Baptist Church of Alexandria, Virginia last week for this.
Yeah.
So it's a thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And apparently 92% of messengers at the convention, they're the representatives, delegates, affirmed that churches with female pastors should not remain part of the SBC.
Yes.
So there we go. That's all I have to add to this.
Yeah, and where there are female pastors, there have to be senior male pastors. Yeah, in accordance with God's wishes. Yeah.
Sure. Do you have anything else to say about this?
No, but should we stick with religion?
Let's stick with religion.
Okay. So Louisiana has just not Ted Landry? Who's
Jeff
Landry.
Yeah.
Governor of Louisiana. Okay.
Adam Landry. No. Jeff Landry, yes.
Has just signed into law a new law saying that the 10 Commandments have to be displayed in Louisiana classrooms. And if you think, we could get away with this by putting it on a postage stamp somewhere, no. It has to be at least 11 by 14 inches in English and displayed in clearly legible script. And it has to be the King James version.
Yes.
Okay, now.
And the display, the 10 Commandments have to be the central focus of the display as well.
Yeah.
And when he says every classroom, it means every classroom of every public elementary, middle and high school, as well as public college classrooms, every single one.
Every goddamn classroom.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to run into obvious First Amendment issues. This is what has been designed for.
Yes.
This is a deliberate case to test the boundaries. Okay, it's not a new idea. In 1976, Kentucky passed a similar law that was struck down by the Supreme Court in 1980. But legal thinking has changed. Okay, and this is where we need a little bit of deep background.
Yeah.
Conservatives are absolutely right when they say that there is no mention in the Constitution of the separation of church and state. That's true. You will not find that anywhere in the Constitution. In 1802, Thomas Jefferson expressed that he wanted to see a separation of church and state, but this was not a universally believed idea. This was certainly not how the First Amendment was interpreted. It was only really in the 1940s that jurisprudence started to lay down this wall of separation between church and state. And I would really see this as a response to basically the increasing recognition of religious pluralism in America. And every time America moved in a more separationist direction, it was in response to this problem. So politically, Kennedy was probably the biggest progenitor of this, because as a Catholic, a lot of Protestants didn't trust him. And his response was basically to try to remove religion from public life as much as possible. Say, yes, I'm a Catholic and that matters to me, but that's not going to affect my decision-making in any way. Okay. But it's sometimes seen as this sort of bedrock of the American Constitution, separation of church and state. It is not. This is not a settled issue at all, and it has constantly been challenged even since it's been a part of jurisprudence. There were a lot of battles over prayer in schools in the 1960s. This was like the original culture war issue. There was a definite race component to that as well, which was that you had all of these white students moving into segregated private academies. But the question was it... it was legal to have segregated private academies, but was it legal for them to then base it around, around religion, around prayer in schools? But anyway, so this is not a settled issue. In the 1970s, there was a decision called Lemon, which was the basis of the 1980 decision. The kinds of tests about whether something violated the First Amendment were, did it cause government to become excessively entangled with religion? And was it something that was being used to advance religion? Was government being used to advance religion? Now, the key case that changed this was in 2022. And it was a few days after the Dobbs decision, so it was kind of widely overlooked, but it was a very important case. This was Kennedy versus Bremerton School District in Washington. Now, this was about a high school football coach who had this habit of praying on the 50-yard line with players after the game. And he'd originally been dismissed from his role because of this, then he was brought back on the condition that he didn't publicise it, but of course he goes and publicises it to the media. So then they didn't renew his contract, and then he moved to Florida but still successfully sued the school district over this. The school district claimed that children felt that they were compelled to participate in the prayers, and that the guy was generally being a bit of an asshole about. I don't know if that was the language that they used, but that was the basic argument that they were making. So the key question in that became, were the children actually being compelled to participate? And the Supreme Court decided no, they weren't. And so the standards changed, right? So it's no longer the Lemon standard of, is government, in this case a public school, being used to advance religion here? Because I think this is pretty clearly a case where it is. But the Supreme Court said that is bad law. That's not what matters anymore. What actually matters is the context of history and tradition. And this is why you now have reintroduction of the Ten Commandments. Okay, so in the same way that Dobbs gave rise to all of these, immediate sort of states trying to push the boundaries as far as possible, same thing happened around Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. All kinds of laws started being passed, like how far can we now push this? Can we actually have chaplains in high schools, in public high schools now? That's something that Texas introduced. Texas was also looking at introducing 10 commandments in schools. That bill died back in 2023. But yeah, Louisiana has done it now. Now, I don't know which way this is going to go. The ACLU and other secularist organisations are saying, the Supreme Court's pretty bad on this issue, but this is very different to Kennedy versus Bremerton.
Yeah, they're forcing it.
Yeah, there's no way you can claim that you don't have a captive audience here. The people aren't being compelled. On every damn classroom wall, it's definitely being compelled. Now, we also get to the fact that they are going to argue, and Landry has argued, this is not about promotion of religion.
No.
How would you think that this is about promotion of religion?
I can't understand it.
This is about promotion of the rule of law.
Yes.
Because the 10 Commandments are the original laws.
Of course.
Now, I just want to go through the 10 Commandments one by one.
Sure.
Let's see which of these are actual laws in the state of Louisiana at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Commandment 1, I am the Lord thy God. Probably not a law.
No, that's not a law.
No. In fact, I don't think I am the Lord thy God is a law anywhere. I don't think.
Probably not.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I'm using the King James language because that's what mandated.
Yep.
That's what's mandated.
Yep.
Okay. Not only is that not a law, that's being actively violated by Trump supporters on a daily basis. Number 3, thou shalt not make graven images. Also not a law, also being violated by Trump supporters on a semi-regular basis, especially at CPAC.
Yes.
4, shall not take the Lord's name in vain. I think that there used to be laws against this. There used to be laws against swearing in ways that invoked the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're long gone.
Yeah.
I think that 5 is keep the Sabbath holy.
Yes.
Now, this is the first one where there is actually some reflection of that in Louisiana law. There are some parishes in Louisiana where you can't buy alcohol or even cars on Sundays.
Okay. All right.
To protect the Sabbath.
Sure.
But that's hardly universal across the state.
Still, let's give them that.
Yeah. Okay, we'll give them the Sabbath. Number 6, honour thy father and thy mother.
No, that's not
a law.
That's not a law.
No, not a law. No. 7, thou shalt not kill. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's give them that one.
Yeah, definitely a law. All kinds of laws stemming from thou shalt not kill, although Louisiana is also one of the states that has the death penalty.
Yeah.
Arguably a violation of that amendment. Number 8, thou shalt not bear false witness. Yeah,
you skipped adultery.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, adultery.
Sorry, I knew I would fuck up the order of this in
That's
some
okay.
way.
That's okay. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Adultery, I don't know if that's still grounds for divorce. It's probably not a law
Don't think it's a law
anymore.
I hope it's not a law for Trump's sake.
Hang on, have I added an extra commandment in here somewhere? Because I think I'm headed to get 11.
I think I am the Lord thy God is not a commandment.
Oh, is that like the
It's
prologue?
just a prologue, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's okay. That's all right.
Okay.
But it's not a law.
It's not a law.
That's right.
It's not a law. Okay.
That's right. Okay. So adultery, that's not a law.
No, that's not a law.
Okay. So you're saying
bearing false witness.
Yes.
That you could argue is there are laws against that.
Yeah.
Number 9, thou shalt not steal.
Yes.
Okay, law.
Yep.
Number 10,
This is what I'm interested in.
thou shalt not covet.
Yes.
Not only is that not a law, that's the whole basis of capitalism.
Yeah.
You do not have capitalism without coveting.
And they screwed it up anyway because they said thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's house.
Yes.
When we all know it's thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's ass.
Yes, that's
we
right.
We all know that. Every school kid knows that one.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So most of these things are not about the rule of law.
No.
The other thing is that one of the ways the First Amendment has been particularly used over the last 100 years or so in recognition of this religious diversity is that you can't, there have been times when the law has been used arguably to promote religion in general. Okay. So, for example, the words "in God we trust."
Yep.
That never ran into a First Amendment issue. And one of the things it is just so general. This, however, is not in any way general. When you're using the King James Bible version of the 10 Commandments, you're actually using a specifically Protestant version of it. Right? A lot of Louisianans are Catholics, including the governor, who's just signed into law an exclusively Protestant version of this. And yes, obviously this doesn't originally come from Christianity, comes from Judaism. But if you're a serious, religiously observant Jew, then you know this in Hebrew, not in King James Bible English. Okay, so I don't think it's about the rule of law, and I don't think there's any way to say that this doesn't promote a specific religion.
Well, what the Republican sponsor of the legislation said, Dodie Horton, is it doesn't preach a certain religion.
Right.
But it definitely shows what a moral code we all should live by is. I don't think it helps.
I don't think it helps
their argument at all. It does obviously promote a particular religion. Yeah. Anyway, she says it doesn't, then apparently it's true.
Yeah.
There are a few precautions they've taken as well, which I don't think like sort of trying to legally constitution proof it.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think any of these make much difference, but I'll tell you what they are.
Mm-hmm.
In the legislation itself, it specifically describes the Ten Commandments, as you said, not as a religious edict, but as the foundation documents of our state and national government. Number 2, the commandments displays will also include a 3-paragraph statement asserting that the Ten Commandments were a prominent part of American public education for almost 3 centuries.
Jesus Christ.
The commandment displays will be paid for through donations, not through state funds as well.
That's how they're trying to get
They're trying to be clever. And
but what do they do if they can't raise the state funds?
That's because it's compulsory. That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. Also,
the
law authorizes classrooms to put up the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, and the Northwest Ordinance. Obviously, though, it doesn't require them. There's a difference.
Yes.
You might be allowed to put up the Ten Commandments, but no, they're forcing you to put up the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we'll say you're right. We can't predict where they're going. I reckon this is too much.
Yeah.
I reckon that the court won't go for it.
Yeah. No, I think they've pushed this one too far.
But we'll see.
Yes, yeah. Now, yes, if I've got any of the commandments wrong or in the wrong order, or maybe we could establish whether I am the Lord thy God is actually a commandment or not.
You got thou shalt not steal the wrong way around. That's number 8, not number 9. Okay. It's fine. I've got it written in front of me because I've got this specific wording.
Okay.
But I didn't want to correct you because that's so pedant.
Yeah.
Like.
I think also there's some. I'm not gonna get into this, but I think like remembering the Sabbath and keeping the Sabbath holy was sometimes considered 2 different commandments.
I don't know.
Anyway,
but also, like, I don't want to correct you for this kind of shit because I don't think people who listen realize this. But Dave never has any notes.
No,
he does this off the top of his head. Like, honestly, it's just amazing. I got like 50 pages of notes for every podcast, and he comes in with no notes and just quotes people. He quotes people with no notes. So I'm not going to pull you up for that shit.
Thank you.
So, anyway. Anything else on that one?
No.
Stats nugget. Woo! Okay, this is a genuine stats nugget in that it's just a whole bunch of stats.
Okay.
They're not going anywhere. It's just some interesting stats about the family. I just saw an article full of family stats. So here we go. In 1990, 67% of the country's adults were married. 71% had been married at some point.
Yep.
By 2019... 53% of the country's adults were married and 62% had been married at some point.
Right.
The number who lived unmarried with a romantic partner grew from 4% to 9%. In 2019 as well, just 63% of US children lived with married parents, down from 77% in 1980. But the shift has been far from equal across socioeconomic classes. For mothers with a college degree, the drop was from 90% in 1980 to 84% in 2019.
Yep.
For mothers without a college degree, the drop was 23 points.
Yes.
Only 60% of kids whose mums have a high school but no college degree now live with married parents. 57% of kids whose mums have no high school degree do. On the other hand, divorce rates are down as well, about 40% from 1980. So they're not getting married, they're not getting unmarried. And they're not rejecting marriage either. According to Pew, February 2024, 70% of never married 18 to 34-year-olds want to get married. Only 8% said they definitely don't want to get married. So they still want to get married.
Yeah.
They're just being more cautious about it. And here's a random family stat. Although the percentage of American women with 5 or more kids fell from 20% in 1976, wow, 20%, to 5% in 1990, it hasn't changed since 1990. It's been 5% the whole time.
Wow.
So
there you go.
There you
go. Basic flaw there. Of lots of children.
Yes. There's not FLAW. No, yes, indeed. Okay, so there you go. Now, I reckon I'll squeeze this in, and then whatever time we have left, you can deal with your remainder topics.
Okay. I can't even remember what my remaining topics are.
Well, we might not get there, so I'm not going to tell you.
Yes.
Bump stocks, baby.
Okay, yes.
Here we go. Okay, Garland versus Cargill. Obviously, this is Supreme Court zone. There's going to be so much more Supreme Court next week, but this is it for today.
Yep.
6-3 case along partisan lines, but this is more interesting than one of those cases.
Yeah.
The facts. You might recall the Las Vegas shooting back in 2017, the worst mass shooting in American history. The dude, Paddock, he shot an outdoor concert from a window in a casino hotel. He killed 58. Injured 867.
Yeah.
Now, you're wondering, how does someone injure 867 people outdoors where they can run away? He used bump stocks to fire hundreds of rounds into the crowd very, very quickly. After that, the bump stocks became the focal point as something that could potentially be banned that might actually help the mass shootings, because normally with a mass shooting, you go, well, what are you going to do about it, mate? Whatever law you try and pass wouldn't have changed the last shooting. Banning bump stocks would have changed Las Vegas, at least the injuries at the very least.
Yes, yeah.
For reasons I don't understand, Republicans and Trump at the time insisted, they were all saying, yes, we've got to ban bump stocks, but they all insisted that the only way you could do it was by Trump's agency doing it, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Agency, rather than just passing legislation, which would have been the easy way to do it. I mean, I think we all know what was going on.
Yes.
But there are clearly there's a bit of bad faith going on here. That at least from some people trying to set up this court challenge.
Yes.
Maybe they were just cowards. I actually think this is a more likely option. They were just cowards and they were too scared to put a vote on the record that they knew would cross the NRA and they knew they'd have to pay for it 2 or 3 years later. They don't mind saying ban bump stocks in the middle of a shooting, but 2 years later doesn't look so good for the Republicans, and so they're being cowards about it. Sure. Whatever the reason, this was their choice for the agency to do it. Now, the regulation was obviously challenged in court immediately. First off, a federal judge and a 3-judge panel from the Fifth Circuit, that's the conservative circuit, they upheld the regulation.
Yep.
They said it was fine, but then the full court of the Fifth Circuit overturned it. They said that the rule of lenity was violated. The rule of lenity is when it requires construing an ambiguous criminal statute in a defendant's favour. So when you're not quite sure of the wording, go in favour of the defendant. In this case, they found the meaning of the criminal statute clear. Anyway, they thought it was clearly that the bump stock regulation wasn't covered by the statute and the bump stock regulation, so therefore the rule of lenity didn't even matter. Okay, so what is a bump stock? The stock of a rifle is the back portion of the rifle, that wooden bit at the back of the rifle that nestles in your shoulder and it supports you holding the rifle. A bump stock pushes the rifle forward when it fires to activate the trigger by bumping it against your stationary finger. And then it allows the recoil energy to push the rifle backward, which resets the trigger and then pushes the rifle forward again, and so on. So the cycle can continue indefinitely, firing repeatedly, as long as the shooter maintains the perfect forward pressure and keeps their finger in place. I can show you easily how it works with clips. For those listening, you can at least hear the difference in the rate of firing. So this is a semi-automatic gun being squeezed manually. And this is exactly the same gun with a bump stock equipped.
All right. Okay. That was faster than I expected.
As you can hear and see if you're watching, it takes a certain knack to get the bump stock firing right, but it is way faster. It fires between 400 and 800 rounds per minute. Now, to actually see how the bump stock is working, I'm going to need to show you a slow-mo video, which isn't great listening, I'm afraid, if you're listening to the podcast. At least the guy is talking through it so you can hear what's happening. But if you want to see, please go to the video.
So watch here as my hand pulls forward on the barrel of the gun. This brings the trigger up to my stationary trigger finger. My finger never moves, but still connects with the trigger due to the forward motion of the gun. The gun then fires, and the recoil brings the gun back to my stationary finger over and over, causing the trigger to be pulled again and again, very quickly, until I run out of ammo. Accuracy is severely compromised, but accuracy isn't really the point of full auto.
Okay, so that is how a bump stock works. In short, they should absolutely be banned. I don't often say things like that, but this should 100% be banned. Why do I say that? It's because using them severely compromises your accuracy. So they're only useful if you want to shoot indiscriminately to cause as much widespread damage as possible. Let me quote Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich, because he is speaking for me in this. There's no law enforcement application for a bump stock. There's no military application for a bump stock. There's no self-defense application for a bump stock. These things are tailor-made for mass shootings. He is 100% right. There's absolutely no reason for these to exist other than mass shootings, which is why I say they should 100% be banned. What's the problem then? Let's talk about the law. The National Firearms Act of 1934 grants the ATF the power to regulate machine guns. Now, arguably, bump stocks turn semi-automatic rifles into machine guns. That's the logic, right? But the precise language of the law, I think, is problematic. I actually agree with the Supreme Court on this one, which is, I bet you didn't expect me to defend the bump stocks, but I think the law, I actually think it's clear. Section 5845B defines a machine gun to include any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manually reloading by a single function of the trigger. That's the phrase. A single function of the trigger. Now, there's a lot of technical discussion in Clarence Thomas's ruling on this one. He got really technical about finger position, forward pressure. There were diagrams. It just went on and on and on. But at core, I think it's a really simple concept. Bump stocks push the gun forward and back rapidly around your finger, so you keeping your finger relatively still engages the trigger over and over again. That's how they work. So the trigger still has to be released and reactivated.
I'd just like to observe
every bullet.
Chaz has the sufficiently muscular fingers to actually demonstrate this.
No, I do. You're
Not
right.
like my soft city hands.
I've got real potential as a mass shooter.
That's right.
Great news. So according to the law, it's not a machine gun in my view because there are multiple functions of the trigger. Every time it pushes the gun back, it's another function of the trigger. It's one function of the trigger for one bullet. It is a single squeeze with your finger for multiple shots, but that single squeeze produces multiple functions of the trigger. So it's technical, but I actually think the wording is clear, personally. I mean, I'll ask you in a second whether you agree or not after I've gone through it. But
you didn't know we were going to be going into this much detail about ballistics today, did you?
I don't screw around when it comes to the Supreme Court. Okay, and by the way, you don't even need a bump stock to do this. Everyone, you can actually, a skilled shooter can do this by just manipulating the gun in a way that they do it without a bump stock. Like you can actually, you can just do it with your fingers. Also, you can hook your finger into a belt loop or using a rubber band. So you don't need a bump stock to do this. So what that means is, unless you're declaring all semi-automatic guns as machine guns because a skilled shooter can use it as a bump stock, essentially, then there's nothing special about bump stocks, right? But if you think I'm splitting hairs here with this discussion, and I get the sense that you probably do, there is a much better reason for Clarence Thomas's ruling, which he also pointed out, which is on more than 10 separate occasions over several administrations, the ATF stated explicitly that rifles equipped with bump stocks cannot automatically fire more than one shot by a single function of trigger. They declared the law didn't apply to bump stocks 10 times before, and the last time they did that was in April 2017. Only a few months before the Las Vegas shooting. And they just turned around and just changed their mind. Like, so I think it's a pretty strong argument that they changed their mind for political purposes. The law didn't change. They just wanted to get rid of bump stocks. And they should. But it's just, unfortunately, I don't think the statute as it exists allows them to do that, to have that power, the agency, which is why they should have passed legislation. Even Dianne Feinstein could see this coming, and she couldn't see much coming by the time we got to 2018, right? So she couldn't see 3 feet in front of her coming by 2018. But I'm going to quote her. And by the way, she's for all her flaws, she was a serious gun control legislator. That was something she really cared about. This is her in 2018. Until today, the ATF has consistently stated that bump stocks could not be banned through regulation because they do not fall under the legal definition of a machine gun. Now, the department has done an about-face claiming that bump stocks do fall under the legal definition of a machine gun and it can ban them through regulations. The fact that the ATF said as recently as April 2017 it lacks this authority gives the gun lobby and its allies even more reason to file a lawsuit to block the regulations. Unbelievably, the regulation hinges on a dubious analysis claiming that bumping the trigger is not the same as pulling it. The gun lobby and manufacturers will have a field day with this reasoning. What's more, the regulation does not ban all devices that accelerate a semi-automatic weapons rate of fire to that of a machine gun. Both Justice Department and ATF lawyers know that legislation is the only way to ban bump stocks. The law has not changed since 1986 and it must be amended to cover bump stocks and other dangerous devices like trigger cranks. Our bill does this, the regulation does not. She was right. She was right. She was absolutely right. And by the way, she was also right about those trigger cranks. Yeah. They're now called force triggers. They are other devices that do exactly the same thing. They're called forced reset triggers or wide open triggers. And what they do is they allow the shooters to fire more than 900 rounds a minute, even faster than bump stocks, with one squeeze. What they do is they involve the trigger pulling every time a shot is fired, but from the user's perspective, what's happening is the trigger is rapidly snapped back into the firing position. Every time it tries to snap back, if you keep your finger still, you're pulling the trigger. And then it snaps back again, and then you pull it again. And so from your perspective, it's automatic. Yeah. But from the trigger's perspective, it's a fire of the trigger every single time. And I'll show you how fast they fire as well. You can hear how fast they fire, and you can see how it works if you watch the video now.
Gassy. Woo! All right, guys, so you can see that the finger comes back on the trigger and it has this little double tap action happening. So the trigger breaks, it gets forward set, and then it breaks again, and then forward set. Every individual bullet fired has one complete trigger motion that is initiated by the shooter's trigger finger. While most of this action happens more or less subconsciously, it is in fact a single trigger movement for a single projectile going downrange. Does not meet the qualification of what's labeled as a machine gun because of this.
They were also banned by the ATF using the same logic as bump stocks in March 2022. The Uvalde shooter who killed 19 kids in a school, he had one of them, although he didn't appear to use it. Now they're going to get legalized again because of this case and because well, the same logic is going to apply, right? Yeah. There needed to be legislation. All right, what's the dissent say about all this? Sonia Sotomayor was leading the dissent. She was of the view that what matters is that the shooter engages in a single pull of the trigger with her trigger finger, and that action via the operation of the bump stock yields a continuous stream of fire as long as she keeps her finger stationary and does not release it. She said, a machine gun does not fire itself. The important question under the statute is how a person can fire it.
All in favour of using language in a way that encourages gender equality. How many mass shootings, though, are carried out by women? Is the use of her really warranted in this when the use of his would be almost 100% factually correct?
Equal rights for women. They can be psychos, Dave. Good on her. But yeah, it is.
I can remember one mass shooting where a woman was involved. It was the one that happened in a Walmart in, was it Oklahoma? Anyway.
I don't know.
Yeah, but let's put it there. There are all kinds of contexts where I want to replace him with her.
But this is not one of them.
This is not one of them.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. She basically said Thomas was being overly technical with his analysis and you should just use common sense when interpreting the meaning of a statute.
Yeah.
She says this casts aside Congress's definition of machine gun and seizes upon one that's inconsistent with the ordinary meaning of the statutory text and unsupported by context or purpose. She said, when I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. And then, because she was obviously quite pissed off, she quoted every single member of the majority saying at some point that you should use the ordinary meaning of words when interpreting statutes. She went through one by one. They said this. They said this. Kavanaugh said this. Barrett said this. Now, I just disagree with her. I disagree that I think when you look at a bump stock equipped gun, I think the trigger keeps being pulled for every shot. Like I said, it's just that you're not the one consciously pulling it. I can understand why she disagrees, but I think the ordinary meaning of the phrase by a single function of the trigger is contestable. And whether you're supposed to look at it from the user's perspective or from the gun's perspective is the question, right? Anyway, she also...
Was that a sentence you expected to hear when you woke up this morning? Think about it from the gun's perspective?
Well, yeah, like the gun often gets ignored, you know? I like to think about just like I like to think about the female serial killers, I also like to think about the gun's perspective every now and then.
There are female serial killers.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Mass shooters.
Mass shooters
Sure.
is a very, very gendered crime.
Sure. Anyway.
Yeah.
She said courts are supposed to also avoid reading laws in ways that would render the law in a great measure inoperative and enable offenders to elude its provisions in the most easy manner. And she said Thomas did exactly that.
Yeah.
Okay. And just one more thing about this. The TV lawyers take on this case is completely wrong. We're seeing a lot of people suggesting, I know who would have thought.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of people suggesting that the court found the Second Amendment protects bump stocks. They did not. Like, for instance, MSNBC commentator Joyce Vance said, does the history and tradition of our country really suggest the Founding Fathers meant for the Second Amendment to arm Americans with guns that fire 400 to 800 rounds per minute? No, it doesn't. And right-wingers like Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton called this a big win for the Second Amendment. No, it's not. The court says Congress has the right to ban bump stocks. It's not protected by the Second Amendment.
Yep.
But they say there is no law right now from Congress that has allowed the agency to do that. They just need to pass the law.
Yes.
Okay?
Fuck you, TV lawyers.
And that takes us to Alito's take, which is that he had a concurrence where he was actually quite sympathetic to Sotomayor's side. He said, the horrible shooting spree in Las Vegas in 2017 did not change the statutory text or its meaning. That event demonstrated that a semi-automatic rifle with a bump stock can have the same lethal effect as a machine gun. There's a simple remedy for the disparate treatment of bump stocks and machine guns. Congress should amend the law, and perhaps would have done so already if the ATF had stuck with its earlier interpretation.
Yeah.
I'm horrified to agree with Alito, but I just have to. Congress should have passed a bill. Of course, with Alito, you never know when it's bad faith.
No.
And this is almost certainly bad faith because in the past, in 1996, he voted to overturn the machine gun ban.
Yes.
So even if they came at them with a law, Alito would probably vote to overturn it.
Yeah.
But anyway, but leaving aside his bad faith, his actual words, I agree with.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dave, I've talked for a long time. What do you think?
I think, looking back on this, that it was almost designed. Like, it was, I think Feinstein was right. I remember Trump's rhetoric at the time saying, I don't mind taking on the NRA. Then the NRA had lunch with him, and he, because he was actually talking about broader, he was actually talking about something broader than this.
Yeah.
After lunch with the NRA, what came out of it was the bump stocks ban. I think the cynicism is warranted around the idea that, we're going to do it through this agency so that it will be completely vulnerable to legal challenge, which a law passed by Congress would not have been vulnerable in the same way. So I think it is pretty clear the way that the Second Amendment has been interpreted, it doesn't extend to protecting stuff like this. So I buy into that that cynicism around it. I think that your take on it is correct. What's obviously very depressing about this is the impossibility of seeing Congress passing a law against bump stocks.
Yes. Impossible.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Despite how obviously good it would be.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. By the way, there's no hunting utility to this either.
No, because it's inaccurate.
Yes. Yeah.
Where do you need to have a gun, but an inaccurate gun?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, there's no utility other than strafing.
Yes.
That's the only utility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
And you're right about Congress. They've already tried to pass a bun stop legislation after this.
Yes.
A Republican Senator Pete Ricketts on Tuesday killed a measure to ban bump stocks through denying unanimous consent, of course, and it will get filibustered if they try to do it the normal way.
Yep.
Ricketts said the bill would not pass because, quote, some people in this building still believe in the Constitution that affords people in this country their right to own a gun. This has nothing to do with owning a gun, you fucking idiot. Sorry to swear. It makes me very angry, this issue. The Second Amendment does not protect bump stocks. Ban them.
Yes. Completely agree.
All right. The topics that you had left over, I've gotten the call, but the topics you had left over, if you want to say talk about either of them quickly, was you had Ukraine and you had USA T20.
Look, no.
No, okay, that's all right. I am going to finish off with some of the stuff we've skipped on Chairs Unleashed.
Okay.
But Dave is about to go on holiday.
I am. I'm not going to be here for the next 2 weeks. I'm actually going to be in China. I am going to miss the debate.
Oh,
You can
I'm
tell
sure
how upset I am about that. Now, this debate, if I were the CCP, I'd be broadcasting it in Tiananmen Square. Because this really is going to buy into certain narratives about American decline.
Yeah.
But even if they do, I'm not going to watch it.
Okay, so next week we are going to have Elle Hardy here as I'll be talking to her over the line as Dave foreshadowed before. Then I am going to be on holiday. We're taking a July 4 break for 2 weeks, but there are going to be some peps during that.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure when, but Richard Cook is going to be back at some point in time pretty soon, and so is my new friend Eric, who gave us so many wonderful T-shirts.
Okay.
Okay, Dave, have a good holiday.
I will.
I'll see you on the other side.
See you on
I'll see you on the other side of the White Flash, folks, with Chairs Unleashed. Stay peppy. Welcome to the other side of the White Flash and Chairs Unleashed. I am pleased to announce that we have 27 minutes left that we can fill according to the edit that I have just done. And I'm going to use that time to fill in some of the gaps that I left during the podcast that Dave accurately diagnosed were causing me great pain. I can't fill all of them, but I can fill some of them. Let's first of all go back to the campaign section, where there was a little section which I just skipped past, which was the bit about how during a meeting with GOP lawmakers, Trump floated the idea of replacing the income tax completely with what he called an all-tariff policy. So replacing the income tax entirely with a tariff. Now, I'm not sure this idea is going anywhere. It sounds more like a brain fart than an actual policy to me, but this is one of Trump's two real policies that he believes in his core. Policies that he, no matter what he says, he actually genuinely believes in. One, that tariffs are good, and two, that immigration is bad. Those are Trump's two actual policies. So you can never kill an idea involving tariffs with enough fire, in my view, if you're talking about Trump. The man lives for tariffs. So let's take this one seriously for now. According to the National Taxpayers Union, it would theoretically take a tariff rate of 71% to replace the revenue from the income tax. Now, Paul Krugman says it would be much higher than that because of course, imports would fall. They wouldn't stay the same when you whacked 71% on top. And if imports fall, that means you would have to increase the tariff to raise the same amount of money, and so on and so forth. That would make the imports fall even further. So he estimates it would take about 133% tariff to make up for the loss of the income tax as far as revenue goes. Either way, that's a lot of tariffs, whether it's 71 or 133% or somewhere in between. Tariffs are super inflationary, okay? Especially 71% to 133% of tariffs, because it's not just the imports passing those tariffs on to the consumer, which of course happens. It's not like the businesses swallow those costs. The local products also increase in price because of a number of reasons. First of all, the companies, the local companies, are going to gouge for sure. If their competition is charging twice as much, then they have less real competition, so they can bump their prices up as well. Also, even if they're not gouging, the fact that it raises the prices of their inputs when they're manufacturing goods, all the inputs from overseas, it means it bumps their prices up as well. So very, very inflationary, especially this kind of policy. That's at least what seems like common sense to me, whereas the RNC spokesperson, Anna Kelly, said, the notion that tariffs are a tax on US consumers is a lie pushed by outsourcers and the Chinese Communist Party. Well, I guess I'm a Chinese communist because it seems pretty obvious to me. Trump has had this ongoing obsession with tariffs, as I said, and in particular the trade deficit. For some reason, he thinks the trade deficit is bad. I don't know why. Maybe because it has the word deficit in it, and he doesn't know the difference between the trade deficit and the budget deficit. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in his head. But other than Trump, no one cares about the trade deficit, but Trump does. Even given that, like raising tariffs doesn't help the trade deficit anyway. In 2017, we know this, we've seen it because of Trump's policies in the past. In 2017, the White House was going on about the trade deficit and how they were going to fix it with tariffs. They said the trade deficit had grown from $317 billion in 2000 to $648 billion in 2016. So first they, and then Biden, because he loves his tariffs as well, they both raised tariffs. And Biden kept Trump's tariff raises. So the average tariff rate on imports to the United States actually climbed from 1.5% back in 2017 to over 3% under Biden. Annual tariff revenue has nearly tripled during that period because of all the tariffs. But in 2017, the last full year before Trump's tariffs were imposed, America's trade deficit was $517 billion. And by 2023, it had grown to $785 billion, despite all those tariffs. That's according to the Census Bureau. Okay, so it won't solve the trade deficit if you increase tariffs. We know that for a fact because we've seen it. And it'll just be a disaster for inflation. And by the way, also an extremely regressive tax system. Like the income tax is very progressive. What I mean by that is that rich people pay a lot more than poor people for income tax rates. But tariffs don't work that way. Tariffs, everyone pays the same amount, the same tax. Not percentage. They pay the same tax in raw numbers for anything they buy. Yes, rich people tend to buy more than poor people, but not nearly as much as you'd like to make up for removing the income tax. So it would be a far less progressive system, just like any sales tax, which is essentially what a tariff is. It's a sales tax on people. I've got tariff correspondence here on this while we're talking this. Nick, asks, this is from last week, interested in your thoughts on tariffs more generally. Personally, I'm not opposed to the concept of free trade and specialization, but I think one important point is often missed, that of fair competition. When libertarians or free market / offshore enthusiasts go on about competitive advantage, it's usually just code for, at best, exchange rate arbitrage, and more often, we treat our workers like slaves and dump toxic waste in the rivers. How would you feel about tariffs or other laws to ensure that imports meet certain environmental and labour standards which domestically produced goods must adhere to? If a product is still cheaper after it's made to the same regulatory standard, then maybe we can talk about the country having a natural advantage in that sector. Well, Nick brought up a whole host of other potential advantages of tariffs which aren't involving either the trade deficit or reducing income tax, and I think what Nick has said is very sensible. So I'm not like religiously against all tariffs, but I think there's got to be a good reason. Right? I believe in competitive capitalism as a broad principle, but yeah, I'm strongly of the view, no matter what we're talking about, that you shouldn't be absolutist and ideological in your policy making. Unbridled capitalism leads, like Nick said, to exploitation. It leads to unfair markets. It leads to negative externalities, which negative externalities when you impose a cost on some other party. Or as Nick put it, dumping toxic waste in the rivers is a good example of that. Pollution is a negative externality, where the company saves money by dumping in the river, imposing the cost on someone else. Okay, so I see that that's where unbridled capitalism leads. Okay, I'm not blind to that. So I think at the local level, it's important to have some regulations on the market to keep the playing field as level as possible. You want healthy competition thriving, so antitrust laws are good. You want also to have, do you want to have environmental laws to stop the negative externalities? Like that. And I'm sure there are others I haven't thought off the top of my head. Minimum wage laws, I think, are a good thing. Because do you want to stop the exploitation of workers? At the international level, I think free trade is the ideal principle that we should strive towards, but a tariff to stop dumping, for instance, I think that makes perfect sense. Dumping removes competition. It removes potentially strong industries, gets them out of the way, and then you have a monopoly or a quasi-monopoly from one particular country. That's not good. Unless they have a real competitive advantage, as Nick put it. I also think using small tariffs as a means of lifting world labor or environmental standards, that makes sense. Good thinking, I reckon. You create a block of groups, a block of countries who are a free trade zone, say, and all you need to join the free trade zone is to meet certain labor or environmental standards. Sounds like solid policy to me. Got no problems with that, Nick. Although, I do think the tariffs shouldn't be very high. I don't think you need them to be high to have an effect. And of course, the devil's in the details, Nick, so you and I might disagree on particular tariffs, but I think, broadly speaking, the broad concept of what you're describing there, it makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense is raising tariffs to reduce the trade deficit for reasons known only to one man, and also raising tariffs to cut income taxes, which, as I said, are a much, much, much more progressive tax system than tariffs are. Okay, so that's that. I now want to go back to the polling section. I did flag out some old people, young people polls, which I thought was interesting. I'll try and squeeze them in the last 15 minutes here. Old people for Biden. We've got a bit more on that. The New York Times Siena poll, Biden has a 9-point lead in a head-to-head matchup against Trump amongst seniors. Quinnipiac from last month, Biden was beating Trump by 12 points with the seniors. And this is noteworthy because of history. Republicans have, with the exception of 1992, 1996, and 2000, won the senior vote in every presidential race for the last half century, this is really unusual. Why the turnaround? Well, I did flag earlier on in the show, obviously, then they might have some sympathy about Biden being bullied about his age. There might be a backlash there. Like Dave said, bullying Biden is kind of like bullying them. In a New York Times poll, this is 6 months ago, but it's just the clearest indication of what I'm talking about. Voters split 35 to 62 on the question, does Biden have the mental sharpness needed to be president? The youngest voters split 26 to 71. So only 26% thought Biden had the mental sharpness to be needed to be president. Amongst seniors, he broke even, 48 to 49, where 48% said that he had the mental sharpness needed to be president. Thought that was quite interesting. I'd love to see more people split up the demographics on exactly that question, because that's the reason I'm going back 6 months. I just need to find an example where they did split it up, and that was what it revealed. Preserving democracy is an interesting issue because that's emerged as one of the clearest demographic dividing lines for age between younger and older voters. Quinnipiac asked, the most urgent issue facing the country today, 10% of registered voters aged 18 to 34 said protecting democracy. For the 65 pluses, it was 35%. It was actually their number one issue. It was a more important issue to them than the economy and immigration. So, old people, you'd think they would be worried about immigration and you'd think they'd be worried about the economy, but no, protecting democracy is their number one issue. And which is interesting. I guess they've got a greater memory of times when America has fought for democracy and all the rest of it. So, and they remember a period before the current clusterfuck. Right? This Trump Biden era where everything was a complete mess, they remember it very well. They remember when democracy worked. Whereas right now, it seems like to people who know nothing but the last 8 years, maybe to them, democracy just doesn't work. So you can see why old people might want to protect democracy more. Old people are also high information voters. They read newspapers. Those who recall are two of the biggest factors in identifying a Biden voter. That they're high information voters and that they're very frequent voters and that they read newspapers as their information source for news. Mind you, there might be a bit of chicken and egg happening here, that the old people like Biden, they happen to be the ones who do that stuff. So I'm not sure what's cause and effect here, but whatever, they do match up. Also, baby boomers, they're likely to be, baby boomers are the old people now. Remember, baby boomers are the aging radicals. They were really left when they were young. And so it's no surprise that now they're old, they're also really left. It's just the demographics are just aging through. And now it just so happens that the guys who grew up quite left happen to be the old people. So that makes sense that they would be more left than old people used to be when the old people were the current old people's parents. Also, baby boomers are likely to be tougher on Russia than voters who grew up after the Cold War, because the baby boomers have a very vivid memory of being growing up with Russia as the enemy. According to Pew Research from April, amongst 18 to 29s, 40% held a very unfavorable opinion of Russia out of the 18 and 29s. Amongst the 65 pluses, 76% held a very unfavorable opinion of Russia. So they would favor Biden's foreign policy involving Ukraine a lot more, presumably. Also, we raised this before as well. Remember the two policies that Biden pointed out in his big ad? One of them was about lowering medical costs. The point I made is when they say lowering medical costs, there is only one group that have actually had their medical costs significantly lowered during this period, and that is old people. Their drug prices have gone down significantly, and they know, hopefully this has been publicized enough, that to the old people at least, that their drug prices are about to go down even more. So because of negotiating through Medicare. So so Medicare, so lowering drug prices under Medicare is a big Biden success. Maybe that's the old people are liking that. I don't know. These are some theories, but either way, the old people are definitely breaking towards Biden. So we've seen some evidence there. Young people breaking towards Trump. Interesting observation from Ron Brownstein in CNN. Buried within the age gap, the young people going for Trump, old people going for Biden, is a gender age gap. According to the Harvard Youth Poll from this year, which is the best youth poll, this is the one which is really high sample size, really targets young people. Amongst likely young voters, Biden led Trump by about 2-1 amongst young women, which was almost exactly his advantage in the Harvard poll at this point in 2020. Hasn't changed. But amongst likely young male voters, Biden led Trump by just 6 points. He was 26 points ahead of Trump amongst likely young male voters back in 2020 at this point in time. Young men were 15 points more likely than young women to support building Trump's border wall. They were 12 points more likely to say same-sex relationships are morally wrong. They were 11 points more likely to say Israel's response to Hamas in Gaza has been justified. Note, these were all minority views for young men, but they just had more of it than young women. The move in party identification is just massive. Amongst young men, Democrats now only have a 3 percentage point advantage in party identification over Republicans, down from 22 points in 2020, whereas amongst young women, the Democratic identification edge over the same period grew from 20 points in 2020 to 26 points now. So there's a bigger Democratic advantage now for young women since 2020. Other polls, other than the Harvard Youth Poll, actually suggest that the issue is not men going right, but women going left. And what I'm referring to there is a Public Opinion Strategies poll focusing on young people as well, which compared 2013 to 2023. In 2013, very slightly more young men aged 18 to 29 called themselves conservative than called themselves liberal. Whereas very slightly more young women identified as liberal. That's 2013. They were basically both 50-50, but on either side of the 50-50. In their 2023 results, though, Public Opinion Strategies found that young men had shifted left, just slightly left. So now they were slightly more liberal than conservative, but they'd shifted left. Whereas young women were now, in 2023, 3 times as many of them identified as liberal than as conservative. They got from 50-50 to 3 times as many were identifying as liberal than conservative. So the women have just gone way left. Now, that's a bit weird and contradictory, isn't it? The Harvard Youth Poll says that the men have gone so right, whereas the Public Opinion Strategy says that the men have gone a bit left, just the women have gone more left. So what's the truth? Well, the different time periods, I think, might resolve that contradiction, potentially. These are just 2 polls, so maybe there's more to it. Maybe one of them's wrong. But potentially, both of them moved, both young men and young women moved hard to the left between 2013 and 2019. But after 2020, maybe the men moved right again back to essentially where they were in 2013, whereas the women kept on moving left. Maybe that's what's happened. That would actually harmonize both those polls, given their time periods. And I can believe that. Because interestingly, this recent move to the right amongst young men is international. John Byrne Murdoch from the Financial Times, an English data analyst, has noted that in countries on every continent, there's been an ideological gap opening up between young men and young women. It's not just America. But why is this? Okay, now this is just speculation here. There's a lot of stats out there. Young men aren't loving life these days. Lower college attendance than women. This is internationally speaking. Lower incomes than women. More loneliness than women. More suicides than women. More deaths of despair than women. Once again, internationally, although it seems to be more in America. Maybe if young men are insecure about having fallen behind young women, a movement based on an implicit promise to restore traditional racial and gender hierarchies, say, would appeal to them. And that goes for conservatives, but it goes doubly for Trump. So that would explain an international move, but particularly a move in America. On that note, Pew, back in May, found 2/5 of the men younger than 50 who are supporting Trump agreed that women's gains in society have come at the expense of men. But that is a considerably larger share than the older Trump supporting men who agreed. So the younger men are more bitter about women taking over their position in society than the older men are. You would never expect that. But yeah, it seems that's the case. So that's interesting. Also, Trump's style seems to appeal to young men as well. It definitely doesn't appeal to young women, not in the slightest. It drives them away. Trump is also more popular in the parts of the internet where young men tend to congregate. Podcasts, Reddit, certain kinds of YouTubers. Might be chicken and egg there, though. It might be that they're popular in those parts because he's more popular with young men. I don't know. But here's, once again, this is a bit speculation, but what's in no doubt is that there is this very, very big gap opening up between young men and young women, and that is the reason why young people seem to be moving towards Trump. It's young men. And those are some of the reasons why. Finally, got about 2 minutes here. Unlikely voters for Trump. We've talked about this before. According to the New York Times, those who voted in the 2022 primary, Biden leads them 49-44. Those who voted in 2022, but not a primary, they voted in the election, but not the primary, Biden leads 46-45. Those who voted in 2020, but not 2022, Trump leads 44-42. Those with no voting history, Trump leads 49-35 by 14 points. So the more you voted in the past, the more you support Biden, right? We already know that, but here's what's interesting. That mirrors their view of the economy. The Democrat leaners who voted in the 2022 primary, 64% of them say the economy is good or excellent. Those who voted in the 2022 general election, but not the primary, 34% of them say the economy is good or excellent. Those who voted in 2020, but not 2022, 21% of those say the economy is good or excellent. And finally, those who have no voting history, 16% of those say the economy is good or excellent. So maybe the thing that is the driving factor of this unlikely voters supporting Trump is their views about the economy. Maybe they are lower information voters. The less likely they were to vote in the past, less likely to understand what's going on in the economy, more going on gut instinct or whatever they see on TikTok or whatever it is, and they therefore are more down on the economy. Maybe. Also, abortion is less important as an issue the less likely a voter you were from the past. 42% of the 2022 Democrat-leaning primary voters say abortion is their top issue. Those who didn't vote in the primary did vote in the election in 2022. 27% of them say abortion is their top issue. Those who didn't vote in 2022 at all, but did vote in 2020, 14% of them. These are Democrat-leaning voters, by the way, for all of these stats. 14% of them said that abortion is their top issue, and those with no voting history, who are Democrat leaners, 14% of them say abortion is their top issue. So once again, the less likely they are in the past, to vote, the less likely they are to say that abortion is their top issue. So maybe these are the mechanics driving this apparent weirdness, this oddity of the more likely a voter from the past, the more likely they are to support Biden. All interesting bits of food for thought. I am now out of time. I'll see you guys next week with El Hardy. Until then, stay peppy.